It makes me look 5 pounds lighter. Ready? Council will call the meeting order. For the record, it is June 3rd, 2025 at 4:30 PM. We'll begin this afternoon's work session with roll call attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Cavanagh. Councilwoman Little Roberts.
Here.
Councilman Taylor.
Here.
Councilman Overton.
Here.
Councilman Whitlock.
Here.
Councilwoman Strader.
Here.
Mayor Simpson.
Here. Next time up is adoption of the agenda.
Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
I don't see any needed changes, so I move that we adopt the agenda as presented.
Second.
I have a motion second to adopt the agenda. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the agenda is agreed to. Next up is consent agenda.
Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
I move that we approve the consent agenda for the mayor to sign and the clerk to attest.
Second.
I have a motion second to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The consent agenda is agreed to. There are no items moved from the consent agenda, so we'll move on to Department Commission reports. First item up is item 18, State Highway 69 CUNA to Meridian Corridor Traffic Study. Good evening. If you can say your name for the record.
Mark Wostall, Idaho Transportation Department, District 3.
Leah Kelsey, DKS Associates.
Good evening.
Mayor and members of the council, thank you for inviting us for a quick briefing on our Highway 69 corridor traffic study. Background and purpose, State Highway 69 was widened from Amity north to Overland in the early 1990s from 2 to 4 lanes. Early 2000s from CUNA up to Amity, current 4-lane facility. With the growth that the region has been experiencing, we have done a traffic study to see what our next future iteration of Meridian Road will look like. We wanted to have a vision of keeping traffic moving, safe and efficient access on and off the corridor with all that additional traffic, and safe facilities and crossings for bicyclists and pedestrians. We'll skip through a lot of the process here, but we had started before this time. We'd had an open house, virtual, and we covered a number of concepts that were considered non-traditional through use. An example of that is at Veterans Memorial Parkway and State Street, where you pass through the signal light, make a U-turn and go back. We looked at continuous flow intersections. After COVID hit, we took a quick, little bit long break, and we had another ITD project on Karcher Road, which is a 2-lane rural highway in Canyon County, and was looking to widen it, and they had a number of features that we had looked at early on. Our executive at headquarters entered into a discussion internally on whether we wanted to do non-traditional intersections with some increase in efficiency in handling traffic, or whether we should keep driver expectancy and keep traditional intersections. In the end, the decision was to keep driver expectancy and to retain traditional intersections only. With that, we reset our project. We came up with 3 different scenarios for access, which we'll cover later. And we talked to our executive team, who gave us a recommended to go forward at full potential access at the half mile in line with IDAPA. So we had an online open house April 7th through 21st. We are finishing up the draft of the traffic study. We're meeting with the cities, county, Ada County Highway District, and we hope to have the traffic study finalized in July.
Yeah, a little bit about the existing traffic out there and the future traffic. Kind of breaking the corridor up into 2 sections, the north-south section, that's the Meridian Road section, and the short little section in CUNA called the Avalon Road section. The north section towards the northern part of the corridor, which is the busiest part of the corridor, the traffic is expected to more than double between now and 2050. That's our kind of horizon design year. That's going to set us at levels that are higher than Eagle Road today, to kind of put it in perspective. The section, the east-west section along Avalon, that's actually expected to drop a little bit. That's due to the reconfiguration of the CUNA and Meridian intersection to extend that, or I guess configure it to a four-leg intersection and extend Meridian Road south. That's a project or study that we'll touch on a little bit later in the presentation too. So with all that traffic, what are the impacts? On the 8-mile stretch of road currently today, going northbound in the AM, which is the dominant direction in PM, or southbound in the PM, takes about 13 to 14 minutes during that rush time. If we do nothing, by 2050, the PM commute suffers a little bit. We're looking at about a 3-minute increase, but the AM dominant direction in the northbound is expected to exceed about 42 minutes. So there's a real need to do some improvements, increase some capacity. If we do our improvements with the proposed vision that we'll get to here in a second, we're expected to bring those travel times back down to existing. A little bit about the crashes out there, the most recent 5-year period. There was about 580 crashes on the segment. When you look at just intersection crashes only, there's a little bit more than 500. 5 fatal crashes, 3 kind of towards the northern end of the corridor, 1 near Columbia and Hubbard, and 1 at the CUNA curve. Just incidentally, 3 of those were drug and alcohol related. So 47% of the crashes on this corridor are serious and injury crashes, which is a higher percentage than what you see on statewide. You see about 31% for all roadways in Idaho. So there is a bit of a concern. This is flagged in ITD's safety corridor analysis as a segment of roadway that has higher than average crashes on similar facilities. So with the traffic and safety in mind, we came up with a proposed vision to accommodate the new traffic or the increased traffic, to widen from 5 to 7 lanes in that north-south section, install a continuous raised median, which will help with safety and also improve mobility. So therefore, the access onto the highway will only be allowed at the 1-mile intersections like Victory, Amity, and Lake Hazel, and then the half-mile intersections. Outside of the right-of-way, there'd be a buffered 10-foot multi-use pathway on both sides. And then wherever there's an access point or an intersection, we would have right turn lanes for safety. The cross-section would look similar to this, where we would have a 30 to 50-foot buffer on either side of the roadway where the multi-use pathway would be included, and that'd be outside of the ITD's right-of-way. Within the right-of-way, there would be an 8-foot buffer that includes the curb and gutter, 8-foot shoulder, 3 12-foot travel lanes, which is a standard travel lane width, and then an 18-foot raised median. And drainage would be accommodated with most likely roadside swales. That would be something that we would identify more closely during design. In the east-west section between K and Orchard, we would have more of an urban section. It's a, oh, I'm sorry, I skipped a little too far ahead. The east-west section would be widened to 5 continuous lanes. Currently, there's a little bit of 4-lane and 2-lane section. There would be 7-foot attached sidewalks, which would transition into that 10-foot multi-use pathway as you move east. And again, right turn lanes at all intersections and access points for safety. So the cross-section in the CUNA to K Avenue section, which is the east section, would look really similar to the north-south Meridian Road section. The only difference is the center lane, instead of being an 18-foot raised median, there would be a two-way left turn lane to allow for access. Then on the short segment that's further west, there would be more of an urban section with attached sidewalks. There wouldn't be a shoulder. And again, with that 14-foot two-way left turn lane. A couple notes about the roadway features. So that 18-foot raised median, kind of looked at a bunch of different widths and modeled it with our turn analysis and landed on that because that allows for U-turns at the half-mile and mile signals for a large passenger vehicle, an F-350. And you could probably get a bit bigger vehicle in there, but our modeling is showing that we could accommodate like a F-350 truck. The ped and bike facilities, again, we have either 7-foot attached sidewalks or those 10-foot buffered detached multi-use pathways on both sides throughout the entire corridor. And then to cross State Highway 69, there'd be single-stage pedestrian crossings at the mile intersections or the half-mile intersections if and when those are signalized. Couple of special considerations more towards the northern part of the corridor in Meridian. We have some constrained right-of-way and some steep slopes, and so it becomes a little bit of a challenge to add in multi-use pathways. Some preliminary concepts would be to maybe have an elevated pathway, which would provide some protection with a barrier, and along those steep slope sections, instead of taking more right of way, there might be some retaining walls. So you'd kind of have maybe a tiered roadway. Then I'll hand it over to Mark.
City of Cuna has looked at extending Meridian Road. They had their own study. It ended up producing a 1-mile cross-section to cross the rail main line and the Indian Creek. As part of that, we removed the Cuna curve, which went in the 1980s, and put in a standard 4-way intersection, which if you go back to 1931, our first plan set, that's what was there in the first place. So it's back to the future. On that one, we also, ITD with the help of Compass, put in a build grant in January. They're supposed to announce in this month the winners and losers, and we put in for a Pell study to look at alignments and what you can do with extending Highway 69 and also what to do with Cunamora, because if on its current alignment, I think that's 5 crossings of the New York Canal and something you don't want to do. So we're looking forward to seeing if we do get that grant awarded. Originally, we had studied the Overland Road intersection. We had determined that a high-capacity intersection was necessary. The one that we looked at was a half continuous flow intersection, which would have been on the Overland Road side. ACHD at that time said that they were not in agreement to construct CFIs. Now, years later, ITD is not going to construct CFIs. So we took that out and decided that needed to be a separate project. We've done those before with ACHD. I was involved with one pre-COVID on Glenwood and State Street intersection, and that's what we're recommending, that it's a standalone. If no one is doing at-grade improvements, that leaves you with vertical, and vertical is a lot more expensive than horizontal improvements. So you really have to get a full buy-in from agencies when you're going to that price point.
So when we rescoped this project in 23, 24, we initially did extensive modeling with 2 other alternatives, which varied the access at the half mile. So the proposed vision again has full access, potential signals at the half mile. We also looked at those intersections being restricted to right in, right out, left in. Those lefts could potentially be signalized or just right in, right out. So you would only have full access at the mile. Unlike our previous modeling efforts with like the median U-turn and CFI corridors and even an expressway, we didn't have a clear winner or loser. All options operated very similarly within a minute of each other when we look at the travel times. And there was a bit of a benefit to signalizing the half mile and having full access, because that takes some of the demand off of the major streets like Victory, Lake Hazel, Deer Flat that are running, pretty heavy traffic. So, yeah, they were all very similar, but there was a little bit of a benefit having half-mile signals.
Finally, we had our public involvement April 7th through 21st. It was an online meeting. 1,900 people attended. 135 comment forms were submitted through the website. Additional 18 people gave comments via email or phone call. Reaction, roughly 55% expressed support, 29% did not express support, and 16% were neutral. We have some more details on comments on the next slide or two. Support likes for non-controversy, all comments regarding converting the CUNA curve into a standard intersection were positive. Widening, increasing capacity of Highway 69, that was about 86 to 14% positive. The negatives were either people who said put transit in instead of the additional lane, you can't build your way out of congestion, or you're letting more congestion come down by increasing the lane count. Buffered multi-use pathway, that was like 28 out of 34 were positive. The ones who weren't had an image of like a 5-year-old on a bicycle. This is almost a direct quote, on the edge of a 55-mile-an-hour roadway. Raised median, there was a general feel of the comments that safety was very important. However, raised medians also cut off access that exists right now to parcels, left ins, left outs. And so you had this push-pull of opposition due to loss of access versus some people saying, we need to have less access or we need more safety. We also had one emergency response comment about accessibility of crossing over a raised median. We had said right turn lanes, and that was universally approved. They liked the overall safety improvement. Concerns, there was no argument that there was a dislike for not having an improvement of Overland Road and or an additional lane onto the I-84 interchange. So that's to push for that. That's a safe and universal request. I think we'd put a link to the I-84 auxiliary lane project in, which will put a second northbound lane onto eastbound I-84. But again, the Overland Road, we need to work on that as a separate project. We added the signals at half-mile intersection were pretty heavily disliked, though not necessarily half-mile intersections. We had a fairly good group who wanted an expressway to be considered. We looked at it early on, and in terms of cost, and it had a low cost benefit ratio. Not that it wouldn't have got traffic quicker to Overland, but when you have a continuous flow facility terminating at volume with a non-continuous flow facility like Overland Road, you really have to build a system interchange such as what we're doing at State Highway 16 extension onto I-84 now. We had also comments on acceleration, deceleration lanes. The problem with those is that at the speed we have, that those would blend and essentially be another lane. You can do deceleration, but you can't do both. They just don't fit. And again, the raised median will limit access, and we had negative comments there. Finally, other comments. We did have a group that said for us to ignore the naysayers and reconsider CFIs through use and roundabouts. We were sort of surprised that actually I don't think it was double digit, but it was a fairly substantial comment. Concern about increased noise and requesting for mitigation to be like sound walls. There's the access issue at Calderwood Drive, which I think would also be looked at as part of an Overland Road intersection study, because it should be within the traffic impact area of the intersection or the operating environment of it. There was a lament over the loss of a rural environment and rural community through the development ongoing. And speed limit changes, those end up, some say slow them down, others say better not slow us down. That's really 50-50, 55-45, regardless of where you are in projects. So we intend, as I said, to complete the traffic study. Our current funding document, we have a new one going to our board in a few weeks. I haven't seen it, so I don't know whether it's made changes, but we have a regular maintenance project in 2029. In February, the IT board approved staff to pursue a STAR sales tax anticipated revenue agreement with Brighton Development, who has a large parcel on the southeast corner of Meridian and Lake Hazel. It was expected by June 2025. We have a key number within our document for it. Because they are still, Brighton is still doing design work, they need to have more certainty on costing before they can fill a final agreement. So we thought at 1st June that could go to July as they go through preliminary through final design and get more accurate costing. We stand ready for questions, Mayor and members of the council.
Thank you. Council questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
appreciate you both being here, and maybe you can help at least council with some action from us. Got a full agenda this afternoon. Came providing the presentation. What is it you're looking for from the council as a result of your presentation?
It's more of an information and feedback. We weren't requesting a approval, disapproval, but we wanted to keep you informed. We've got other projects in the area, and we wanted to, since this one would be on closing out, that we wanted you to have a chance to hear it before it went to close out.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Schrader.
I have a handful of questions. One of them, I guess just maybe to take a step backward, talk to me about your decision to exclude the ID4 to Overland segment from this study. Like, why was that decision made? It's surprising to me just because like I view that as one of the biggest problems that we have. And seeing that excluded, that segment excluded, kind of leaves me feeling frustrated at least. And I'd love to explore that decision. How does that impact your study's relevance? And like what assumptions were made about fixing issues in that excluded segment? And what kind of commitments do we have to fixing the problems in that segment is what I'd like to talk about.
Originally, we had come up with a horizontal solution that was not in the, I guess, the design book for ACHD and projects with mutual intersections. It's important that we are both on the same page because nothing gets done otherwise. We knew going to a vertical solution was, in terms of study, a big increase in cost, which we were not internally looking to put onto this project. As I said also that we've, like in 2018, I think we did a mutual study on State and Glenwood, and really for us to get full buy-in by both agencies, both have to be at the table. Specifically on this, a project like this, this was the only controversial part really, in terms of trying to come to a design decision. And so we passed it on to saying that it would work better as a mutual project. Typically, we count lanes going into the intersections and we split the cost based upon that. And it was just really too big of a project for what we were doing in our piece of it. It became, and that's why we just said it needed to go to a different process than the one that we were running.
So I guess Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Schrader.
if you don't mind, I'd love to hear then, like, what is the thinking or the plan around addressing that? Because you guys could improve this whole corridor. I'm sure that'd be fantastic, but if everyone gets to I-84 and it's a giant disaster, I'm having a hard time seeing how that's going to move the needle for people. So help me understand what the plans are or the thinking, if there is any to date, on how and when that excluded segment would be addressed.
Really, that's a discussion. ITD and ACHD meets twice a year, and that's something that at that management level, they need to come together. I'm sure they've heard from the city that that's very important to the city, and it comes down to management
Got it.
only the trigger on moving forward with something like that.
I could just piggyback on it. They've talked about the vertical in the past, but I think the question that I'd have is, to the point, how relevant is this? How much of this decision framework is based upon the mile between Victory onto the interstate as it compares to what the final treatment for that is? How do you interlay that into the value benefit? If you were to
Yep.
have a flyover coming off of ID4 over the ramp that lands on the other side of Overland, how does that play into the long term of this portion of the corridor study? Was that taken into consideration that you would have continuous traffic movement off of the interstate onto the segment, especially going southbound? Maybe not northbound, unless that, I don't know how that one works, but I'm just kind of curious because that's, I think, part of the question is the relevance to the work when you have a big segment that's going to be impacted.
Yeah, the traffic modeling that we worked with Compass, the MPO, they generated the traffic demand. What wants to be driving on the corridor in 2050? And when we originally did our modeling, we had a solution at Overland that allowed the traffic to get through down to Cuna and then up to the interstate. And then, when we had to pivot, we continued to assume that there was a high capacity solution there so we could right size the remainder of the corridor. So the demand would still be the same if we had a flyover versus a CFI versus some other high volume intersection. So we feel pretty confident that the proposed vision to the south will be adequate no matter what the solution is at I-84 and Overland Road.
We also have a separate project, our I-84 mobility study that kicked off in January. And we're looking at adjacent intersections next to the interchanges, which includes Overland, and we're anticipating coming out with guidance from that study.
So when I say you don't feel this is wasted work because the end result, whatever is done, it won't impact the results of this section generally, because Compass says this is what it will be, irregardless of how quickly you get them from the interstate onto this south of Overland.
Correct.
Sorry. If there were more questions,
Mr. Mayor, thank you. If you don't mind, I just have a couple more. That was helpful. I guess, I think you kind of touched on this in your presentation, but I had to step out for a minute. When you were doing your modeling, did you model like CUNA's expansion of Meridian Road South and unplanned developments that are likely coming, from that build out of their impact area? How did you account for that?
So the Compass model did include in their roadway network that extension to the south. As far as the potential development in that area, we didn't add any additional demographics than what is approved in the CIM. So there may or may not be, I guess, some of the demographics included further to the south, but there is an additional study that is coming that will be looking at a couple of different land use models when that extension is added and Cunamora is widened all the way to the interstate.
I just have two more. One of them is just funding sources generally. It sounded like there's no funding for this so far. I'd love to just hear more about what, besides STAR funds, what funding sources have been identified. And then, you know, obviously multi-use pathways are important to City of Meridian. I think we've said that over and over 100 different ways. Just want to check, are you all envisioning taking on the cost of the multi-use pathways along this segment? I mean, there are some of these constrained segments that you talked about, special treatment, whether it's retaining walls, whether it's some tiered approach. I mean, is that all expected to be incorporated together? Because I think what we wouldn't want to see is like a kind of a halfway effort, you know, where it's like we end up with widening, but not the pedestrian facilities that are needed to support a healthy functioning community.
On the Chinden widening, we have constructed pathways all on the south side only because we intend to widen to the north and then put them in at that point. So we've been consistent recently of putting in pathways with widening projects.
Okay, Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Stringer.
I will provide a compliment that I do live in North Meridian, and I think you've done a very nice job with your multi-use pathways to the south on that segment. So thank you for that. Okay, that was it for my questions, but if you could touch on, I think, funding sources and a little more on the pathways, if there's anything we need to note. I think at some point we may come back to you with more formal feedback, you know, once we have a chance to digest all this, so.
One part of the STAR project, that's a maximum of 35 million, but I think that they're aiming at 30 million due to potential cost overruns and pricing variability, is we're looking to see what gets built out of STARS before we jump into our own design. Next week, I believe we're supposed to have a preliminary design meeting. So that'll give us some better idea of what they think they can build, how far. And then our development services group is actually taking the lead on this. Just to note, we have not been told by Brighton who their tenant or tenants plural are going to be. So just that they'll meet the definition of the legislation to be eligible for STAR. But I think once we know what they're going to build, then I think that puts us into a better position to know what we need to finish up to.
Council, additional questions?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Overton.
So I had the opportunity a month ago at Compass to speak with someone from ITD. I explained to him at that time that the description I got from someone from ACHD was when we're dealing with Overland and I-84, the best word he ever used was it's broken. And I sympathize with that, looking at the numbers, because they do exceed Eagle Road. And we constantly are talking about State Highway 55, and sometimes I don't think we talk about Highway 69 enough. Today, at our Compass meeting, I met with a member of CUNA City Council. And when I asked him about all this work that was being done, he kind of had the same frustration as me. We're hearing from you tonight, but we don't hear from you enough. We don't have enough input opportunities as a city to understand what it is you're looking at doing. And I'm not trying to speak for the city of CUNA, but they're out there at the 54th fastest growing city in the country right now. While we're still growing to the south, and I've seen Mayor Joe Steer's project of taking Highway 69 further south, I think the numbers we're going to have coming in from the south, or coming in from the south, coming north, are going to be very high. And I get real worried, much like what Councilwoman Strader said. I think you can widen this road all day long, but if we don't fix Overland and I-84, all we're going to do is create a much larger bottleneck and a longer wait. And we need to come up with a plan, some sort of a phasing plan that includes all of it, that you prioritize which part of the project is most important first. And I hate to say it, but I think Overland I-84 is the most important part, because that's your pressure release valve for the traffic. Because if you build the road wider first, we're just going to stack them up as they get into Overland and get into I-84. And when I spoke to, and I'm not going to call him out here because he's not here, when I spoke to ITD at the Compass meeting, he agreed. The problem is if the reason we're not having this conversation is because this is too expensive, then we're not doing our job. If this is ultimately a very expensive solution, then we still need to have that conversation and we still need to see what our solutions are to move forward. Even if they have a lot of zeros behind them and we're not sure where all that funding's coming from. Because as far as I can tell in our entire community right now, and the entire community of CUNA, this is the #1 traffic spot that they have a problem with. And when we sit there and you mention Compass, the whole idea of Compass is to come up with a regional solution to traffic problems. And I'd really like to see both the city of CUNA and the city of Meridian much more involved as we go through this, so we understand what you're looking at. And we don't just have these talks every once in a while where we get to ask a bunch of questions. I personally would like to be a lot more involved with this process as it goes forward, and I'm sure several other members of our council would as well.
Council, additional questions or comments?
Mr. Mayor, just,
Councilman Kavner?
you're here to Councilmember Overton. I recognize you guys are working with the direction you've been given, but this is going to create a very large problem that is already in a challenging spot. And again, not the smartest guy in the room when it comes to traffic engineering and moving cars, but I know what I see over there as a resident in that area right now. And as CUNA continues to grow, it is a problem that will continue to get worse. So it's hard to be excited about this when you see it as causing a major problem down the way.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Little Roberts?
Mr. Mayor, and thank you so much for being here. I was going to comment, but I think that Councilman Overton covered that very well. I also am from that area. And I love seeing the possibility of improvements on that road, but to move more cars into a major bottleneck seems to have the cart before the horse. But my main question, since he covered that so well, was I was wondering if I could get a little more information on the continuous raised median. Because I live so close to that area, I see when the road's blocked, especially it hasn't been that long since we had a fatal accident. And our closest fire station to that area is on Overland, slightly west of Meridian Road. And so it seems like it's still efficient getting to those that are southbound, but those that are northbound, if fire engines need to get over a raised median, how does that work?
Yeah, my understanding is that and I'm not a geometric design engineer, but the curb would be a higher speed curb, which is a little bit more sloped and it's mountable. So it's not ideal to drive over it, I understand, but it is traversable. And then there'll be, U-turn opportunities at the half mile and mile. So, yeah, if it isn't too far out of the way to just kind of take a right and then take a U-turn.
For the Karcher Road project, I was involved in the environmental, but not the final design of it. We had a meeting with the fire department. It was one of the volunteer fire department. I can't remember the name. And they brought up issues with a raised median. But what they wanted to know is if they could drive on it so that you'd have mountable, dismountable curbs in the direction of it. So one of their issues there, Karcher Road being 2 lanes at this time, is if there's a crash, you just can't get to the site. So theirs wasn't so much crossing over, it was operating on top of it. And I can't say how that turned out, but in terms of design, but that's probably something I need to look into.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And I know that you're doing what you're asked to do and balancing multiple things and maybe even some things that haven't been said. I know that there's concern if we dump all the traffic too much onto I-84, it's going to have a big problem as well. So whether it's a Overland Road problem or a onto the interstate problem, there will be a problem one way or the other right now with what the projected numbers are if we don't have a bigger conversation about a lot more things in this, but we understand your roles in this process. So thank you very much.
Welcome, Mayor and Council.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to item 19, which is a legal department discussion request regarding the Ada County Emergency EMS District to enter intergovernment and joint powers agreements concerning CIPs. Mr. Starman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. This is a follow-up item to a discussion you had back in December of last year relative to a request from the county to consider, along with the other cities, incorporated cities in Ada County, a county-wide impact fee program. I know you received a pretty thorough presentation about that back in December, and I also recognize time is limited tonight, so I'm going to keep my comments very brief, but I'm happy to answer questions you have. And also, let me mention now that we have representatives from the county available on Zoom if you have questions of them, Leon Letson, as well as the consultant for the county. So we have some resources here, although not physically present, available by Zoom. I'll just start by saying, as a recap from your discussion in December, the county is interested in doing county-wide impact fees. That requires the cooperation of all the incorporated cities in Ada County, including Meridian. And so we talked about at that time, if Meridian chooses to participate, a potential implementation plan to accomplish that would be sort of a multi-phase, multi-part process, with part one being a limited intergovernmental agreement between the city and Ada County that would essentially say this, that the city would agree to consider the county's capital improvement plans that are related to the facilities in question. But the agreement, we would make it clear that the city is not agreeing to adopt or to implement those CIPs, nor is the city agreeing to adopt an ordinance to implement the fees. We're simply agreeing that to provide a structure to consider the capital improvement plans. We would then come back as step two to look at the CIPs, and then later, if the other cities come on board, at the end of that process, we'd actually talk about the possibility of adopting an ordinance to assist the county with its county-wide program. Again, making it clear that the city is not committing today to do any of those things, simply just to consider those items. So that's really what's before you. In December, you had a draft agreement as an attachment. The agreements before you this evening are essentially identical, a couple changes here and there, but they're substantially similar to what you saw before. So the county has approved those. The question for the city council this evening is that those agreements are satisfactory to the city council. You may need some additional questions answered tonight or maybe on a going forward basis, but we're not asking you to take action tonight. We're simply just touching base one more time before we place this on a future agenda for action. So we're looking for your feedback tonight. If the city council is amenable to proceeding, the next action step would be to have something on your agenda likely in 2 weeks for formal approval. That, just to reiterate, that would just simply commit the city to consider the possibility of adopting the CIPs, does not lock us into approving those CIPs. As I mentioned, we have representatives from the county online. They can answer questions as well. I just want to touch on two topics from December, and then I'm going to step back and answer questions in the interest of time. There was some discussion back in December about an observation made that the county has the ability to implement at least impact fees for the sheriff's office without city participation. And so I just wanted to report to you, my understanding is, and we can have the county representatives clarify, but my understanding is that the county has adopted an ordinance to implement that fee for the sheriff's office. I'm not sure if they're collecting the fee yet or not, but my understanding is that they have adopted an ordinance, and so as a sign of good faith. The other topic we talked about at that time was the issue of, we had this, I thought Councilmember Strader described this really well. I'm paraphrasing, but this is a clunky process. So I like that quote. And we talked about, is there a way to make this, streamline this with the legislature? And so there was a discussion about, is there a way that we can make this more like ACHD, or at a minimum clarify, for example, the coroner's office being eligible for impact fees? My understanding is that, I think for two thoughts there. One is that with respect to having an ACHD-like model, that would require a constitutional amendment. You heard that in December. We're in agreement with that. I think the county just decided that this could be too much of a heavy lift. And they, to my understanding, they did not pursue that idea. In a similar manner, with regard to clarifying the issue of the coroner's office, we talked last time that the statute allows for public facilities or public safety facilities, which includes things like jails, but that language does not explicitly mention the coroner. And so we talked about, would it make sense for the county to get clarification from the legislature? And I think for their own reasons, I don't want to speak for the county. They just chose not to pursue that either at this time. Possible they could do that in the future, but that really that sort of stands where it was back in December. So that's a lot of information, but I know you've seen this before, and I also recognize we're short on time tonight. So I'm gonna pause there, happy to answer questions. And then, as I mentioned, we have representatives from the county here as well.
Thank you, Kurt. Appreciate that. And just for the record, council, if and when you ever do consider this, I will make the request that you do not adopt a coroner impact fee because of that issue not being clarified. And even though they've chosen to try to indemnify us all they can, I still don't think the risk is worth the reward in this case based upon the building that currently exists in its current form. But with that, council, any questions for Kurt?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Kurt, either if you know the answer now, or if not, maybe in a couple weeks when this comes back, have any cities signed such an agreement to date? And if so, who?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, and Council President Kevner. To the best of my knowledge, no city has officially adopted the CIPs, nor have they entered into intergovernmental agreements. My understanding is the county has had substantive discussions with many of the cities, I think in some cases more than others, but I don't believe that the county has binding agreements or actions from any of the cities at this point, to the best of my knowledge. And I would invite my colleagues from the county to chime in that they know differently that. So they know how that works if I know they're online, but you just raise your hand function and the
Yes,
clerk will acknowledge you.
Leon is raising his hand to answer the questions. I thought that there was some that have actually adopted. Mr. Watson?
Can you hear me, council members? Sorry.
Yes, we can. You're good.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, just an update to what Kurt was sharing. So the city of Eagle and the city of Star have adopted the CIPs into their comprehensive plans at this point. So in essence, making it through phase one of the process that we've identified. CUNA and Garden City have requested a similar agreement to what Meridian has asked for. So we've drafted similar agreements for those jurisdictions, and they're reviewing those and considering similar to what you're doing tonight. Entering into that agreement to then move on to that CIP step and ultimately, hopefully, the ordinance adoption. And then City of Boise, our COO, Steve Rutherford's in conversation with their chief of staff and mayor on progress there. So I don't have much of an update with the City of Boise, but just wanted to let you know that we have gained some ground on the effort. Also, will confirm we have adopted a fee to collect impact fees, or adopted an ordinance to collect fees for the sheriff. And we are actively collecting that now on every building permit issued in unincorporated Dade County. And yeah, that's the update I have for you right now. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any additional questions for Ian? Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. So next steps, Kurt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So really the thought was that the council was in general agreement with the agreements as they exist. We place them on a future agenda, perhaps on the consent agenda for action. If we require some additional discussion relative to the coroner's office, we can follow a similar plan, but perhaps have it on a work session item again for that particular item and then ask for, adoption at that time. I guess I'd take direction from the city council and from the mayor.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Taylor?
I think I would appreciate at least a short discussion on the coroner's office, and I think that would be helpful and be informative. And I understand kind of the reasons behind it, but I think that would be helpful. And two, if I just might make a comment too, I like the idea of agreeing to a structure, not agreeing to necessarily the CIP plans. I think that gives us some leeway and some flexibility moving ahead, but showing good faith to the county that we're working towards that while still trying to understand where the rest of the municipalities in the county are with regards to that. I understand Star and Eagle have where to move forward, but where Boise is right now and others, I would be helpful. So that would be my feedback, Kurt. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Next item is item 20, which is the Fire Department Deployment Analysis Presentation. Turn this over to Chief Butterfield.
Mr. Mayor, maybe real quick before Chief Butterfield begins, for council's benefit, we've got significant members of our fire department that are here for, I think is a really important presentation. I don't want Chief to feel pressed for time. And so I guess I want to just give council some perspective. We've got this presentation. We can move a budget amendment to next week or add that to our main meeting. Well, we do have a public hearing scheduled for tonight. I do think it is important for us to try and do those public hearings on time. Guess I'm looking for some direction from council as do you want to take a brief recess? You could have a quick bite of dinner and then we would just go from the fire presentation then into our regular meeting. Or are you comfortable with us delaying our public hearing to give fire the opportunity to provide their presentation in full?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Schroeder.
Maybe just, I'm open to all of that if it works for the fire department, if it works for their schedule, to take a brief recess. I also think this is mainly informational at this point. I was actually going to volunteer to just give a quick overview of sort of how this came to be, this presentation. But I'm open to that. If it works for the council and the fire department, I think that's the question.
Works for me.
Yeah. Can I ask how long you think your presentation is?
20 minutes.
Yeah, how about we just go through the presentation and see where we are at that point in time, and then we can either break or keep going.
Just, Mr. Mayor, I appreciate that. We didn't want to interrupt the flow. This is important info and we didn't want to put them in a position where they had to press pause halfway through. So
I believe Mr. Miles is prepared to do the amendment on the 6 PM if we want to do it at 6 PM tonight, so. Okay. Chief Butterfield.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, thank you for the opportunity. As Councilmember Strader had mentioned, there was some input that she had to the fire department, request for some deployment modeling after we met and reviewed some of the analytical software that we use in the fire department. And following up on that meeting, she mentioned a request to come up with some four different deployment models. So
Mr. Mayor,
go ahead.
Councilman Schroeder.
if you don't mind, I'm just going to take 1 second to just maybe give a little lead in here. We have Dark Horse Analytics, which I think everyone is familiar with at this point. Phenomenal tool. Sat down with Deputy Chief Butterfield and the team, was blown away by the amount of analytics and information that tool can provide. And that was the genesis of this presentation was, hey, we have hired many firefighters through the SAFER grant. We have a good amount of them coming on board and we have a lot of resourcing. That doesn't necessarily mean that any one deployment model is the right answer for us at this point. And I just sort of asked a question, could you show us 4 different options, advantages and disadvantages of different deployment models so that we could become educated going forward on what those look like in our new analytical tool, Dark Horse, and just to get a feel for starting to socialize some different approaches that we could take. Thank you.
As well as part of this also played into the conversations around the station remodels that we're proposing, the how, the when, the where, and the why. So it is not just, like say, theoretical. Some of it is very, how do we move forward in the immediate future with some decision points that are going to be put before us. So with that, Chief Butterfield.
Thank you, sir. So the first thing I do want to mention in this presentation is all of these options, as I kind of go through the 4 different options that have been created, none of these increase staffing beyond the current level, including the SAFER grant. So as we move forward, this is inclusive of all personnel that are currently hired by the fire department. None of this will incur any future hiring as described in the deployment model. So as was requested, we broke down to 4 different models moving forward. 4-person staffed apparatus at 8 stations is the first model, and I'll elaborate on each one of these as we move forward. The second model is a multi-company staffing at Station 1, so a 3-person engine and a 4-person truck company. Currently, right now at Station 1, we just have a 4-person truck company, so we would be adding an additional apparatus at that particular station. The third model, a new fire station located at River Valley Road and Eagle Road with an engine company. The premise of this really came out of Dark Horse Analytics, and when we look at the predictive analytic modeling that software does, it really points to that area of the city being the next location for a fire station. At some point in the future, based on road travel, based on call volume, based on the number of calls that we're projecting, the growth, number of residents that are going to be added, multifamily residents that are being added, so on and so forth, recognize that at some point, that's going to probably be the likely location of a new fire station. And then the fourth model was adding a two-person squad at Station 4 and at Station 5. And I'll talk a little bit more in that particular model, what squads are, and a little bit more in depth on that. Some of the key performance metric criteria goals that we look at that were established by the fire department as we went through the accreditation process and developed our standards of cover are what we want to achieve. Our goal on every emergency call and lights and sirens response to calls, we want to arrive at an EMS call in 7 minutes and 50 seconds from the moment we get the alert at the fire station to arriving on scene. 8 minutes for fire calls. We give a little bit of buffer time in there because we know we got to put on more gear, equipment before we actually go on some fire calls. And then the arrival of an ERF response, what we refer to as an effective response force. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, about 11 minutes. And the ERF is essentially getting enough people on scene to do critical tasks in a short amount of time. So 3 fire engines, a ladder truck, and a battalion chief in under 11 minutes. These are our goals as we've established them. And when I talk about an effective response force, a lot of work went into what we call a critical task analysis. So this is indicative of the things that we need to do on an emergency scene in very quick time and quick order with the personnel. So we have a tiered response to our structure fire. Somebody calls 911 and says, my house is on fire. Immediately out the door, we're sending 3 fire engines, a ladder truck, and a battalion chief on just that request. A lot of the times, actually more times than not, it doesn't turn out to be a house on fire. It turns out to be a multitude of other things, and a shorting outlet, furnace issues, burnt food on the stove, a cigarette butt in a planter box, but we initially send out that initial response. When we do get on scene or even en route and we realize, no, this house is on fire, we have flames coming from the house, we will add additional resources to that call, including another fire engine, another ladder truck, another battalion chief, an ambulance supervisor, because now we know we've got a major incident that's going to need a lot of people. And when we are on those particular ones, through the critical tasking, we need a minimum of 23 people to get on scene to handle the events that are taking place on those types of emergency scenes. And then we're not even getting into the next level of an apartment fire, a big box store fire, multi-level high-rise fires. Then you're adding another 20 or 30 people because now you've just complexed the incident by the different divisions that need all of these different critical tasking. The metrics and the quantitative data that we get out of Dark Horse is pretty profound in what we travel time. We know the travel time distance and we know ERF, but more people on scene, what doesn't get told in the story of the quantitative analytic piece is what happens when we get on scene and needing more people on scene sooner. The National Institute of Standards and Technologies has done some critical task evaluations and 25% faster with 4-person crews than 3-person crews on getting those critical tasks that have been identified and getting them completed in a timely order. More personnel on scene quicker allows for better rotation. Rehab, you can imagine when it's 100 degrees outside like we get here, people are going in the work cycles of firefighters inside a burning house, in their gear, on air, get much more compressed when we're dealing in the summer months. So we understand we can get people through that quicker. We get people on scene quicker. OSHA standard 2 in, 2 out rule. Anybody that goes into a burning building, if we have 2 people going in, we have to have by OSHA standards 2 people out. And it's hard to achieve when you only have to send 3 people on a fire apparatus. You have to wait till somebody else gets there. Certainly reduce physical strain. As you can imagine, more people are showing up. We're able to, lift ladders more easily with more people. We're able to forcible entry, breaking down doors is easier with more people, especially if you have to do multiple doors on the same building. Stretching hose lines is easier. So mental fatigue, mental strain, injuries related to that is another area. The arrival of more people sooner, which is not necessarily in the quantified piece metric of Dark Horse. And then improved outcomes from CPR resuscitation efforts is another one, and I'll elaborate a little bit more on that. So I believe, let's see if we have. So this is an example of a fire, and you can imagine as we have a fire occurring, And this is actually not uncommon for us to have two fires, especially with how close homes are being built in the city. And then you get a shed in between there that catches on fire. We actually get these a couple times a year. But you can imagine with this fire happening, the multitude of things that I just went over need to happen quickly. We need to get a lot of people as quickly as we can to the incident to start handling all those critical tasks as quickly as possible. So what is it we're looking for when we arrive on scene of a building that's on fire? And this, I think this particular picture is actually becoming very common in Meridian. We're seeing a lot of garage fires due to lithium ion battery, thermal runaway of lithium ion batteries, people leaving lithium ion batteries on chargers, whether that's for their leaf blowers, for their lawn mowers, for their cordless drills. We're seeing quite a rise. And I'll tell you, our crews are really good at stopping these fires. If we get there quick, we can get water and save the house from burning down and contain the fire to the garage. I would say our crews are very good. We get a lot of these a year and we stop it just like in this picture a lot of the times because we can get there quick, we can get people on these quick and stop that from happening. So our containment goal, we want to contain the fire to the room of origin. The quicker we can get crews on scene and wherever that fire started, if we can keep it from getting up into an attic and burning the house down or into multiple rooms, then we've kind of met our goal. Our rescue goal, ensure all occupants are out of the building. We just had a fire yesterday afternoon, and this includes pets. So we saved a couple of pets yesterday afternoon at a fire in Northwest Meridian. Overhaul, we want to ensure no elements of fire remain when we leave, and salvage goal, protect any owner's belongings, especially as we get through, taking down the overall first fire attack, if we can get fire knocked down, and then as we're looking for hot spots, we're pulling ceilings, looking for any growth, get people's belongings out. Very common to have a quick conversation with the homeowner. Is there anything that's valuable or very important to you that we can go ahead and get out of the house and give to you before we start spraying a whole lot of more water as we're looking for hot spots and things like that. So that's another a common goal that we look to achieve. Our first arriving so from a data perspective, our first arriving apparatus at building fires in Meridian, our response area, in under 8 minutes, we can right now do that 63% of the time. And our ERF right now in Meridian, trying to get all 3 fire engines, a ladder truck and a battalion chief on scene in under 11 minutes, about 30% of the time. Some of that I think is really relative to the fact we have 1 battalion chief covering the entire area. It takes a while for them to drive across town. So we're not going to get that entire complement of apparatus there that quick. I just want to cover a few points of across the bottom of this particular side. You can see growth of fire. So as we look at fire doubles in size about every minute, and we recognize that as fire is progressing through burning of a house, that survivability goes down rather quickly as that fire grows from 100% survivability to 30% survivability, sometimes in just a matter of minutes. So again, this really speaks to the fact of how quickly we can get firefighters on scene in the shortest amount of time. Another area I don't think we really talk about is the impact of the citizens of our city, is that if we don't get there and stop that fire, and our goal, contain it to the room of origin, the impact of months of displacement for those homeowners can be pretty extensive. If we can stop it quick, like we did in the example of the picture of the garage, I mean, 10 to 20% of damage, they're out 3 months and they're back in their home. But if we start losing that structure and we start getting complete burn of the structure upwards in 18 months, that now they're going to be displaced from their home, which is quite an economic impact and a major inconvenience for them. Another area too is just the cost of repair. If we can stop that fire quickly, and looking at this as that fire progressive all the way up, once we start losing that or we stop it at a half burnt house, now they have to have an expense of tearing what remaining part of the house is down and then getting to a point of then rebuilding the house. So scenario 1, 4-person staffed engines. This particular graph is from our Dark Horse analytic model. This is essentially a heat graph that they use using hexagons. So this is essentially where we're headed right now in July. We'll be moving to a 4-person staffed engine apparatus at all fire stations And from a statistical analysis, using the analytics, it doesn't really change our first due arrival time. We're not really going to be getting on time quicker just by adding another body to an apparatus. We'll be able to get done things quicker on scene when it comes to critical tasks, but first due doesn't really change. So our ERF, we were at about 30%. By doing this, we do increase that to about 35% by getting more people on scene quicker in that under 11-minute time frame. So we'll definitely see a rise in the percentage time of that. And then there's some other important aspects of the 4-person staffing, even some internal testing that we had done with the training division and our own personnel, recognizing if we arrive on scene on a mock training scenario with a 3-person crew, how quickly can we get water supply established? So hooking the hose, dropping the hose off of the engine to a fire hydrant, connecting to the fire hydrant, charging water from the fire hydrant to the fire engine and stretching a line. We saw a 74% increase in time savings just by going to from a 3-person to a 4-person crew, and with the times that are noted on this particular slide. And then also a 27% increase in time savings for victim removal. Again, this was our own data, our own training officers, our own people, recognizing 7 minutes and 46 seconds for a 3-person crew versus 5 minutes and 38 seconds for a 4-person crew. And then the EMS outcomes, improved EMS outcomes on calls. Certainly, as you can imagine, if we're arriving with 4 people or with just a greater people responding, EMS providers, EMTs and paramedics, the division of labor is going to be better. Lifting and moving patients, we actually sustain back injuries of our personnel every year from lifting heavy patients. And so, I mean, you can imagine if somebody 400, 500, 600 pounds on the ground and you end up with an engine company of 3 people and an ambulance crew of 2 people, and you need to move this person onto a gurney and out to the ambulance. A lot of the times we do end up with some injuries that I think are certainly more labor is going to help reduce those potential injuries. Vehicle extrication is another one. More people on the scene quicker. We can do extrication, patient care, stabilization of a vehicle, things of that nature. Sometimes we provide assistance in critical transports. Ambulances only show up with 2 personnel. Sometimes in our city, we have some pretty significant either injuries or medical conditions that require additional person in the back of the ambulance to assist. Certainly having more people is going to help with that. And then CPR performance, you can imagine somebody in cardiac arrest. There's a lot to be done in a very short amount of time. We need somebody to do chest compressions, set up the AED, manage the airway, breathe for the patient, medication administration, et cetera. It's kind of a complex series of events, and more people make less work of that. The next scenario I'm going to move to is our new station with the 3-person staffing. So this is a new fire station, Eagle Corridor, probably over in that the River Valley Road area. Looking at the metrics, when we add a new station over there, it does increase our first due and for fire and EMS, and it increases our ERF a little bit, but not quite as much. And so this bar graph really shows where our first due, EMS, first due, non-EMS, and ERF. So if you think about it, it makes sense where Station 3, Station 4, and Station 1 are going to see a big increase of all 3 of those because there's now a new apparatus in that particular area of the city, very much on the east side of the city. So all of those metrics are going to be quite much, they're going to be a lot better. But Station 5, Station 6, Station 7, the rest of the city doesn't have that influx of those new personnel and that new apparatus. So it does kind of shift really good over there, but not quite as much in the rest of the city. Scenario 3, the multi-company staffing at Station 1. This is one that as we ran the analytics, I was actually quite surprised myself at what we saw. So first due EMS and first due non-EMS doesn't change a lot because, again, I haven't completely solved the time-space continuum, but recognizing that where people, how we move quickly is going to pretty much stay the same, even though we're adding 2 other apparatus. But I think what was really important in this is what it created in the ERF across the entire city was pretty profound. Across the entire city, 9.4% as a collective, and then you can see each individual station area, pretty substantial increase because now you have an apparatus with 3 people that it can get across the city pretty quickly within those emergency events for the critical need and to accomplish those critical tasks that we need accomplished on those particular incidents. And recognizing that there's also some other, now we have another apparatus, there's some outside of the quantitative data that we're looking at. we have two apparatus at Station 1. So if Station 8 needed to send an apparatus in to downtown for some training, we now have an apparatus we can move out and provide coverage to that particular area of the city, where right now, when Station 8 comes in for training, we don't have coverage. So there's some other benefits by this particular model that isn't even captured necessarily in the data. And scenario 4 of two squads, Station 4 and Station 5. And again, if you're looking at the metrics, a little bit of first due increase, definitely some increase to the ERF as well, 6%, not quite 9% that we got from Station 1. When I talk about a squad, this is really the vehicle that we're talking about. We recognize in the city, the majority of our calls are EMS calls, 70 to 80%. And I would even say 20 to 30% of our actual calls don't need a fire engine, and they don't need 3 people on a fire engine. They could be handled with this type of vehicle, with a paramedic and an EMT very successfully. We run about between our lift assist and fall patients, we run about 1,100 calls a year. It can easily be handled with this particular type of, it would still include these people on this apparatus, would go to fire calls, so they would be part of an ERF and be able to round out in the fire call where we need those critical task people. And there's some other things we can certainly contain small fires. This would have water on it. It'd have vehicle extrication on it. It would still be able to, I think, handle duck rescues. As you all know, as council, we could do a lot of duck rescues. Certainly could mitigate those as well. We could phase these in. And this particular vehicle, as the purchase of the vehicle, would be eligible impact fees. And again, we wouldn't be adding personnel. This would just be a shift of people. So as I'm kind of getting close to wrapping this up, scenario 1 will be in place in July. We will have 4-person staffing on our fire apparatus in a couple months. And I would refer to this as really good. This is really good for the city, and it's a really good deployment model. The next scenario, building a fire station, it's going to definitely be the greatest expense. I think we don't even have necessarily land identified yet. If we were to start moving through a process, identifying land, entitlements related to that, and everything related, probably 4 to 5 year window out by the time we actually had a fully staffed functional fire station. I think even at best, maybe 4 years. Scenario 3, this is the dual engine ladder truck at Station 1, readily achievable. We have a fire apparatus to do this, and a greatest overall ERF performance increase. So I would go, this is much better. So we went from really good to what I would describe as much better by moving into that particular model. We're going to be doing some remodels on Station 1. I think that'll be part of that conversation. And then scenario 4, I think, is the best overall. The squad approach, a lot of other cities are starting to move to that. The Eagle Fire Department's moved to a squad approach. Napa is moved to a squad approach. I know the city of Boise did a trial on a squad with really good results. So I know they're heading in that direction over there as well. So, and that particular model, the greatest impact on reduction of apparatus maintenance, repair, and replacement over time certainly is as we come before council with the request for fire apparatus, which is getting more and more expensive. We recognize here's a way we can solve some of that. If we're not sending really expensive fire apparatus to a lot of calls we don't need to, we should see a reduction in some of that. So my final thoughts for you. Really, the leader's intent from the fire service, from the leadership of the fire department, is to really go from what's really good, which we're going to be seeing here in a couple months, to what is much better as we remodel a station and provide a dual company response out of Station 1 to ultimately, hopefully down the road, a best overall squad. So that's really kind of what this phased approach as we move forward in. Upcoming fire stations are certainly going to be provided options to accommodate some of these deployment models and be part of that conversation. And I do want to reiterate, as we did kind of move through all of these models, we're not going to be coming and asking for more personnel to make any of these successful. We'll be able to do these with the personnel we have. So with that, council, mayor, I would stand for any questions.
Thank you, Chief Butterfield. And I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but I'm going to put words in your mouth for you. For the immediate time being, there's no request for any additional employees to, as we look at these 4 options, but I'm sure that if the direction of the city is 4-person staffing, generally, it may be 4-person staffing and 1 or 2 of these other models in addition, that would not be 4-person staffing, but 2-person staffing on something as an aside. So I don't want to hold you to that forever in case some of you are here in 10 years. We said we'd never be asked for that standpoint. So council, questions? Councilman Whitlock.
Appreciate the presentation and the overview. This is great data and fascinating. I'm impressed by the squad concept and had a chance to go on a ride along this weekend, and there were two call outs for fire to come and assist, and a squad would have been perfect at the Speedway, and then one in North Meridian. Could have handled the situation easily. Can I just pivot and say, what then happens if at the same time a squad of two is out? Do you have coverage back at the station if a fire breaks out somewhere else?
Yeah, Councilman Whitlock. Yeah, so the idea of the squad concept would, it would be co-located in a station with a fire apparatus. So there would be probably three-person or four-person staff fire apparatus and a two-person squad. So the squad would primarily be covering EMS calls, would still go on fire calls, but if they were out on an EMS call and a fire call came in or another EMS call, then certainly the engine would respond.
Mr. Mayor, just a quick comment.
Councilman Overton.
I think I'm truly amazed that we're talking about a concept that I used to watch in 1972 on television called Emergency 51. That was all about a two-person squad truck from a fire department responding. And here we are back with it again.
Mr. Mayor.
I watched the reruns, not the original.
Johnny?
Councilman
Roy.
Taylor.
I was born 7 years later. I'm going to piggyback on the squad concept. Really, I like that concept because it seems like a more efficient use of time. And I really like the idea of not burdening or wearing out our really expensive apparatus for something that's obviously going to be a lot more cheaper to maintain and replace. My question though is when you get a call, do you know if it's something that you could send a squad to, or is that known before you deploy, or you on your way you're figuring out? Can you kind of talk to me about how you would understand what type of response you need and when and how quickly?
Absolutely, Councilman Taylor. From the 911 dispatch, they pretty much send us to whatever the type of emergency that they receive in dispatch, then attaches a certain response to that emergency. So we could certainly tie it to whatever the response criteria is. And I think we have like 3,400 different potential call outs that attach certain apparatus to it. So.
Mr. Mayor. Thank you so much. You and your team put a ton of work into this and we really appreciate it. I think it's just going to help us get better. I also was very interested in the alternative response vehicles just based on the price tag of our new ladder that we're pursuing. So any updates on that, I guess would be my only question, where we're at with are we making progress on trying to get a new ladder truck? Sorry, that's a curveball I didn't prepare you for, but.
I believe it is in the procurement department of the city right now.
Excellent.
Working through the contract.
That's so great. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Bearfield, Chief team, for bringing this. A lot of good information, a lot of questions still to be answered, and a lot of practicality as we move forward. So, thank you. So council, still want to move item 21 to the next meeting? Okay, then with that, do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
we adjourn the work session.
Second.
Motion and a second during the work session. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are adjourned. I know what it is.
Thank you, Chief. Sorry about that.
Council will call the meeting in order. For the record, it is June 3rd, 2025 at 6:01 PM. We'll begin this evening's regular city council meeting with roll call attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Cavanagh.
Here.
Councilwoman Little Roberts. Councilman Taylor.
Here.
Councilman Overton.
Here.
Councilwoman Strader.
Here.
Councilman Whitlock.
Here.
Mayor Simonson.
Here. Next item up is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd all please rise and join us in the pledge.
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is Mr. Zachman present? Then we will move on to the adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
therefore to give council a quick minute to grab a bite of dinner, we did not complete item 21, which was a budget amendment. So I move that we're going to amend the agenda and add that after the conclusion of item 4, our public hearings for the evening. And with that, Mr. Mayor, I move we approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
I have a motion, a second, to approve the agenda as amended. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the agenda is agreed to as amended. First item up, we have two proclamations. The first one we're going to do is Elder Abuse Awareness Month. And if we could have Trina join us from the Ada County Victim Service Center at the podium. So council, we will first read this proclamation on elder abuse and turn it over to Trina for any words would like to say and make sure we get good pictures for you in that context. So whereas ageism and social isolation are major causes of elder abuse in the United States. And whereas after a lifetime of contribution to their families, their communities, and our state, every Idahoan deserves to live out his or her days in health and security. Yet every year, millions of older Americans are denied the opportunity due to abuse, neglect, and exploitation. And whereas preventing abuse, neglect, and exploitation of older adults through maintaining and improving social supports will allow everyone to continue to live independently as possible and contribute to the life and vibrancy of our communities. And whereas 2025 marks the 19th annual World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, its recognition will promote a better understanding of abuse, neglect, and exploitation of older adults. And whereas organizations like the Ada County Victim Service Center recognize the importance of taking action to raise awareness of abuse, neglect, and exploitation of older adults. Therefore, I, Mayor Robert E. Simpson, hereby proclaim June 2025 as Elder Abuse Awareness Month in the city of Meridian and call upon the citizens, government agencies, and public and private institutions of Meridian to recommit to our community to increasing awareness and understanding of elder abuse and the steps our citizens can take to protect our elders. Today, the third day of June 2025. So on behalf of the city of Meridian, please accept this proclamation, and I'll invite you to say a few words, and then Sean will get us a good picture.
Thank you very much, Mayor. This is very important day and month, recognizing our elder and our vulnerable community. I'd like everybody to know about the Ada County Victim Services Center. It's located down at 417 South 6th Street in Boise. We're open 24/7, and we have a variety of services for our elder community as well as those who've been victims of sexual assault, child abuse, domestic violence, stalking, and human trafficking. So thank you very much. This is very meaningful.
Council, I'll just say if you haven't been down there to do a tour, I encourage you to get down there and tour the new facilities. Quite impressive. With that, we'll move on to our second proclamation of the evening. If I could have the Owyhee State Champion softball team join me at the podium along with their coaches. You know, it's always great. We do tend to see some legacy returners these last couple of years amongst many of our state champions, whether, you know, for multiple schools. So we're excited to be here this evening. We're going to read this proclamation. And while we do have, we have another proclamation that goes in the record, which has everyone's names, but we are going to ask you to say it so those watching on at home will know who you are. But after I read the proclamation, Coach, turn it over to you guys for any comments, and then ask the players come up and say their name, position, and year in school, and if you're going to come back next year or not. So to be a state champion, that's what we want to hear. So whereas being an Owyhee High School softball player is more than making, pitching, fielding, hitting, and achieving state titles, it is training to build leadership, character, confidence, teamwork, and resilience, all traits needed to succeed on the field, in the classroom, and in the real world. And whereas the Storm were the team to beat all season with a 28-1 overall record and an 11-0 conference record, winning the Southern Idaho title and advancing to the state championship tournament. Whereas top seed YU Storm won their first 3 games of the state tournament by an average of 7.6 runs. And whereas YU rallied for a 3-2 win to cap off an unbeaten run through the state double elimination tournament and capture a second title in the past 3 years. And whereas the leadership, training, and discipline of their coaches helped all team members to focus their talents and passion to become a winning team, with each player making valuable contributions to their victory. Therefore, I, Mayor Robert E. Simpson, hereby proclaim June 3rd, 2025 as Owyhee High School Softball State Champions Day in the city of Meridian, and call upon the community to join me in congratulating the Storm on their remarkable athletic achievement and for representing Meridian so proudly in the state tournament, the 3rd day of June, 2025. On behalf of the city of Meridian, congratulations, ladies and coaches, on your successful year, and I'll turn it over to your coaches for any comments.
Nobody ever wants to speak. Well, first of all, thank you very much to the council. I will say this, softball is so much more than a game. We're excited about the season we have. We did dominate. I mean, it was pretty emphatic, beating Eagle and Meridian in there, but I digress. I do want you to know this. I think things like tonight are really cool, that we can honor these young ladies for so much more than a game, because it's really not a game. It's teaching life on a piece of dirt and grass in the middle of Meridian, Idaho. And I think this is a special place. I think this is really cool that we do this as a community, and it is about community. It's about our 11 seniors that will leave. We're super proud of them, but we're also proud of what Owyhee has done over the years in our first 4 years, but also what we're gonna do. And we're really gonna try to set the standard for how we live our lives, not just play the game. And hopefully that's a reflection in the outcome on a scoreboard, but the reality is life isn't played on a scoreboard. It's played in between the beginning and the end, and it's what you do during that time that really matters. And that's the expectation at Owyhee. I think it's the expectation in our city and our community, and we're thrilled to be here. So thank you all very much.
My name is Grace Brooks. I am one of the pitchers, and I'm also one of the graduated seniors.
My name is Maddie Mahaffey. I'm a first baseman and I'm a sophomore. Hi, my name is Lisa Gaetan. I played first base at Owyhee and I'm one of the graduating seniors.
My name's Sobela Madrudakis, and I'm a senior, and I play shortstop.
My name is McKenna Shab. I'm a graduated senior and I'm a catcher outfield.
My name is Alana Addis, and I'm a graduate senior and an outfielder.
My name's Elena Bryant. I'm a graduated senior, and I played corners and catcher.
My name is Madeline McNulty, and I play middles, and I'm a graduated senior.
I'm Sailor Shoemaker. I'm a junior, and I play outfield.
I'm Kennedy Garrett. I was a designated hitter and I was a freshman.
I'm Haley Bach. I was a pitcher and I was a freshman.
My name's Charlotte File, and I was a right and left fielder. I'm also 10th grader.
Everybody wants me to speak. I'm Cal Fazio, the assistant coach and the program hitting instructor. This is not going to be our first year here, so we're going to be back. And that's all I got to say.
Picture. Oh dear.
Thank you. The meters open real automatically at Rocky Mountain. Like 6 in the morning on a Friday during summer vacation. That's business.
And for those that didn't know, the Storm were the winners of the Water Tower Championship. So their banners should be up hopefully by the end of the week. If not, it'll be early next week for the summer. So with that, we will move on to the next item on our agenda, wherever it went. Anyone sign up under future public forum?
Mr. Mayor, no one has signed up.
Okay, then we will move on to our action items. And next item up is item 3, which is public hearing for program year 2025 Community Development Block Grant Action Plan. We open this public hearing with staff comments from Crystal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. If you'll give me just 1 second to share, I apologize. Sorry for that wait. So this is for our plan that runs from October of this year through September 2026. And this is our recommended projects for this upcoming year. So quick overview of the CDBG program. We do receive the federal funds from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. We do provide a 5-year consolidated plan. During that plan, we go out to the public and stakeholders to identify the goals for the upcoming 5 years. And then each year we submit an action plan that says how we're going to meet those goals. We received a letter from HUD saying that this year we are anticipated to receive $523,218, and that is for year 4 of our 5-year action plan. The goals that we have for this action plan, or I'm sorry, for this consolidated plan are public improvements, permanent housing, public services, and program administration. This is a breakdown of the recommended projects based on the goals. So right now it's looking like about 11% for admin, 15% for public services, and then public improvements and housing are both right around 37% of the overall. 2 of those goals are city-led projects. The first one is program administration, and this just supports planning, management, and compliance with the program. And we also have the second one, public improvements, and this one is based on the goals that, or I'm sorry, the needs that were identified in the 5-year plan. We conducted a CDBG walkability study, and all of these funds go toward those projects. So the specific amounts for each of these goals, under program administration, we are asking to set aside $57,000. There is a 20% of the overall grant that is allowed for admin, but we are not needing to use all of that for admin this year. We'll be able to use the rest of it towards the other projects. So this will be for general administration, planning for our upcoming consolidated plan, and any fair housing activities, which is usually a fair housing campaign. For public improvements, we are looking at our Better Walkways, which is an improvement to sidewalks and lighting in areas that were identified in that study. We're asking to put $193,867 toward that. The primary project is one that we began funding in for the first phase this current year, and it's Northwest 7th from West Carlton to Cherry Lane. And the additional funding would go toward completing the additional phases. If we have any remaining funds, if it's underspent or reallocated or anything, it would go towards our alternative projects, which are listed here. We have East Badley Avenue near Northeast 2.5 Street and East 3rd Street. And then there's another one in the same area at East Washington. And then there's a potential project for a pathway across the Jackson Drain that would connect the Fairview Terraces estates to the Chief Joseph Elementary School. We also have some partner projects. These ones are selected through a competitive application process, and there's 2 separate applications, so they're not competing for the same funding. The first one is permanent housing, and this one supports long-term housing solutions, and the other is public services, which is more immediate short-term needs. To be a viable project, they must show that there's a connection to housing stability. They have to show how they're going to require the participants to be income eligible. And for the CDBG program, that's no more than 80% of the area median income. And for Meridian, a 4-person household could make up to $85,600 and still qualify for this program. So these are like working families that are just not quite able to make ends meet. And they also have to be a Meridian resident living within city limits. The 2 recommended projects here, there's a 15% cap on public services. So this is the maximum amount that we would be able to. The 2 projects that were selected by our scoring committee are Jesse Tree's Emergency Rental Assistance Program for $43,483. This one provides temporary rental assistance for people who are at risk of losing their housing. And then the second one is for the Boys and Girls Club Scholarship Program for $35,000. And this gives access to childcare with extended care and summer programs. For housing, there's one program, the NeighborWorks Boise Homeowner Repair Program for $193,868. And this is for weatherization, accessibility, and emergency repair for owner-occupied homes. And so it can't be for any rentals or anything. It has to be owner-occupied. And this allows them to stay stably housed in housing that they can afford. So we have a couple of next steps listed here. On July 8th, I'll be back for a public hearing where I can give you any updates for the outreach that I've received, any feedback, and the public comment period will also close. And then on July 22nd, I will have completed the final report with any feedback that I've received and have that along with the resolution on the consent agenda for you to approve. And then by the end of July, then I plan to have it submitted to HUD. So my ask for tonight is that we get some community feedback. We really want to hear that this is the direction that the community wants us to go. There's multiple ways that you can provide feedback. We're going to have a couple of virtual open houses where people can sign in and ask questions. I'm going to try and get some of the people who are recommended for funding to be there to be able to answer questions too. The first one is scheduled for June 18th at 10 a.m. and the second is July 30th at 3 p.m. The links to those will be on our website. There's also an online survey so that people can, if they're not comfortable just giving open-ended feedback, then they can just answer some specific questions on how useful they think these programs are. Then people can also provide some feedback at the public hearing on July 8th. And I'm also trying to get some more in-person events scheduled, which will also be on the website. And if anybody wants to talk about any of it, they can contact me, Crystal Campbell. My email address is ccampbell@meridiancity.org. My phone number is 208-489-0575, or you can look on our website at meridiancity.org/CDBG. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Crystal. Council, any questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Schrader.
more of a curiosity, but just I've been wondering, like, are you anticipating changes in future years, based on changes in federal funding? Have you received any communication from HUD regarding that? I'm just more curious what we could expect going forward.
So we are mostly guaranteed funding for this upcoming year, but after that, it's really, right now, it's not looking so great. It was one of the items that were zeroed out on the skinny budget. So we are waiting to see how that goes, but I'm not sure if we're going to. So anybody who wants to reach out to their legislators and advocate for the program are more than welcome to.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Schrader.
I more was thinking, I mean, along the lines of, I think not for this conversation, but in the future, I think it would be important to prepare the, especially the providers that we work with at Jesse Tree and, you know, certainly with the childcare as well, just to have that discussion at some point so that they're not completely caught flat-footed. I'm sure they're aware of all of these changes, and certainly there's no doubt that the United States government at a federal level is looking at a pretty dicey fiscal situation. So I just appreciate you kind of providing some context, because I think the last thing we want is for someone to get here next year and just be completely blindsided. So that's why I asked that question. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Caver.
Crystal, because of the engagement you're doing, is the request then just to keep the public hearing open and then we'll close it at the conclusion in July?
Yes.
Thank you. Appreciate your presentation.
Crystal, I just had one question. It is July, excuse me, July 30th for the other one, so it would be after the public hearing is closed. Is on your virtual open house, you have one June 18th and the other says July. Is that supposed to be June?
Yes, you're correct. Thank you for catching that.
Okay.
Should be June.
Okay, so June 30th at 3 p.m. for the other virtual open public. Okay.
Thank you.
Right. Any other questions for staff at this time? Okay. All right. This is a public hearing. Madam Clerk, did anyone sign up to provide testimony on this item?
Mr. Mayor, no one has signed up.
Okay. Is there anybody present, either in the room or online, who would like to provide testimony on this item? Seeing no one coming forward or raising their hand online. Council, do I have a motion to continue this public hearing?
Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
we continue this item to our July 1st city council meeting.
8th.
July 8th. Thank you, team. Appreciate July 8th city council.
Second.
I have a motion second to continue this item until July 8th. And is there any discussion? If not, in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. This item is continued. Thank you, Crystal. Okay, next item up is item 4, which is a public hearing that was continued from May 13, 2025 for Centerpoint Apartments H 2025-0009. We will continue this public hearing with staff comments.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. So we are here tonight because the applicant is proposing to move forward with the project approval that was received in 2022 under H 2022-0072. That was for Centerpoint Apartments. With the modification to the existing development agreement, this modification would create 2 new agreements, which will allow the properties to be developed independently. So this is a site plan for the approved Centerpoint Apartments. It had approximately 213 units. And this is the commercial portion of that project that was approved through a CUP for a drive-through there. So on December 3rd, 2024, the council approved findings for H-20240019, and that was for the modification of the development agreement and the conditional use permit to facilitate the construction of 239-unit multifamily affordable apartment project The proposal strictly pertain to the residential component of that approved development plan. The applicant also requested alternative compliance to the open space and parking lot. But in January of 2025, the applicant terminated the entitlements and withdrew their application for that project due to complications at the state level with project financing. So then we did an administrative time extension for the project before you. Prior to the expiration date of April 1st, 2025, the applicant submitted an application for an additional 2-year. So during this process for review of the previous one for the affordable housing, ITD had required that the applicant to dedicate 12 feet of right-of-way on Eagle Road to reconstruct a right turn lane to Seville Lane. So they wanted it to extend it down to turn in here. The current DA that we have requires the applicant to place the street buffers, pathways, as well as a 20-foot landscape buffer along the west and south boundaries to develop with the residential parcel. And what the applicant is asking now is to, in order to separate these, he wants to do all this with parcel E for the residential portion, and then for the parcel F, which is the commercial portion, he wants to do the landscape buffer, the pathway along Eagle Road, and the right-of-way dedication and the proposed improvements by ITD with the commercial portion. The applicant has no objection to these conditions. He has worked closely with ITD on these conditions. That was part of the continuance because the applicant was still in working with ITD to work these out because before all of this was with the residential portion, but ITD has agreed to allow them to do the right-of-way dedication and improvements along Eagle Road with the commercial portion because they will be doing improvements along Eagle Road for that. So he wanted to do 2 different DAs, one for the commercial portion and one for the residential, so these properties can develop independently and not be tied to the same DA. And staff has worked with him to, on the conditions of this DA that is in the staff report, and in working with the applicant, he has no objection to that, but he will tell you that himself. We've been working really hard to get this to where it works for the applicant and for the city. So basically, that's the gist of this development, the modification for this. And so at this time, as you can see, nothing has been developed yet, but staff will take any comments or questions that you may have on this application. It's pretty straightforward from what staff had to deal with.
Thank you, Linda. Council, any questions for staff? Appreciate it. Well, the applicant like to come forward, make any comments? Good evening. Say your name and address for the record.
Mike Mafia, 3030 North Centerpoint Lane. I'm the owner of the property and applicant. Good evening, Mayor Simonson, council members. I'm just here to answer any questions.
Council, any questions?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Strader.
I was just curious, have you had any further meetings with the neighbors? Have you had any discussions? What kind of feedback have you heard about this kind of, I guess, return to the old version of a project here?
I have not, since Devco we removed their application because that was the 239 units, an increase in units, but spent a lot of time on the original entitlements, working with the neighbors, the landscape screening items we talked through in 2021, I believe, and have stayed in contact and prepared notices for these various applications for the CUP extension and also this MDA modification. So we did have neighborhood meetings that I held for both. So yes. yes.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Strayer.
Yeah, more to this point, I mean, because certainly with the previous project, the affordable housing development that was contemplated here, we had a lot of interest from neighbors, and I saw that there weren't any comments, which is usually a good sign. But maybe just a reason to double check that this was noticed, that, you know, you went through the meeting that you were supposed to have, et cetera.
Yeah, it came up during some of the public neighborhood meetings and clarified that this was going back to the existing entitlement and that we're just separating the DA. One being a residential development, the other being commercial. There's a bank. Originally, the plan was to develop a Starbucks on that drive-through. They since passed on the site. This is many years ago in the history. And there's now a regional bank interested, but they don't lease, they buy and require a separation of the DA to proceed. And that all was explained to the neighborhood. So.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Strayer.
No, thank you. That makes sense to me. And then I do want to, I think, compliment you for, while I did not appreciate your last continuance, I do appreciate that you worked with ITD and have gotten on the same page with them. So I assume at this point you're in complete agreement and you will follow all the conditions that they outlined in their letter.
Correct. It was a new requirement to construct a deceleration lane, so there was a lot of time and energy spent understanding the specific dimensions, budgeting. It's a pretty significant cost increase, but we were able to reduce the stacking and the taper length to the frontage of the property. So, yeah.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Strayer.
Just one more for me, just to say I appreciate you doing that because I think I would have had a hard time if you were not able to meet that requirement. And I mean, this, from what I understand, this is like one of, if not the busiest intersection on Eagle Road. So is it really in the whole state? Yeah, well, there you go. So, I mean, there is an acute need here. I drive by this every day and the traffic is a disaster. Part of it's the whole network of private roads and stuff back in this neighborhood. I don't know how we are going to solve that one day, but that's not your problem to fix at this moment. So I just wanted to say thanks for working with ITD. I realize the economic cost of building that is significant, but I do think it will help our community.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cower.
I just want to echo what Councilmember Strader, just appreciate you and certainly Linda working in collaboration. I'm one that gets pretty persnickety about continuances, but when it results in a better project, it's easy to be in agreement on. So appreciate you working with our staff, listening to their feedback, and Linda working with the app. Really good partnership.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Taylor.
Mike, just a quick question, and it's reasonable, makes sense why you need to separate the parcels for the different developments. Is there a sense of timing with the development of them? Or is one going to develop before the other? Can you speak to that? Or are you planning to hopefully have them relatively under construction at the same time? I'm more of a curiosity how you intend to do that.
Yeah, and ideally they would, the regional tenant has been waiting for the CUP extension. That was phase one, which was granted, and then this MDA separation. You know, I can't speak for them because it is a sale to them. But I've worked ad nauseum with them on easement agreements, cost sharing agreements to accommodate that. So my hope is that it does proceed. In the meantime, I'm back here working with consultants today, trying to move the project forward. You know, it's no secret, multifamily development has come to a screeching halt nationally, but I'm hoping to start this project next year, or early next year. So, yeah.
All right, thank you very much. Okay. Madam Clerk, anyone sent to provide testimony on this item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No one has signed up.
Okay, is there anybody present who would like to provide testimony or anybody online who would like to provide testimony? If you're online, you use the raise your hand function. We do have someone online who'd like to provide testimony.
Hello, Mr. Mayor and Honorable Councilman. This is Jeff Verba. The address is 3005 North LeBlanc Way, Meridian, Idaho, 83646. And I just wanted to let you know the applicant did have a meeting with us earlier this year to discuss this. And I personally am for the split of the two parcels, so at least one could get fully developed up front with new landscaping and items like that. So just want to let you know that that's what was going on. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Council, any questions?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Schrader.
Not a question, but just a comment. Thank you very much for chiming in. We appreciate hearing from you since we have heard from all the neighbors on all of the previous applications. It's just nice to know that a meeting occurred. You all have seen this. We do appreciate that follow-up. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Is there anybody else that would like to provide testimony on this item? Would the applicant like to make any final comments, or are we good? Applicant waves for final comments. Council, what's your direction?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Schrader.
I'm happy to kick us off. I move that we close the public hearing on this item.
I have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Is there a discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it, and the public hearing is closed.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Schrader.
I think there are a number of reasons that this project makes sense. I think obviously from the neighbor's perspective, it appears that there's a decent level of support as evidenced by the individual who testified, but also by the lack of public testimony, which we have seen a lot of opposition to previous projects. Feels like this is landing in a comfortable place in terms of the unit count and kind of going back to where we were at. I'm very appreciative of the construction of the lane required by ITD. I think that will hopefully help a lot. But again, we do have constraints in the neighborhood behind here that are just really challenging. I think this is a decent outcome to move this forward. So after considering all staff, applicant, and public testimony, I move to approve file number H 2025-0009 as presented in the staff report for today's hearing date. And I don't believe we need any modifications to that. Thank you.
I have a motion and a second to approve item H 2025-0009. Is there discussion on the motion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh.
Aye.
Little Roberts.
Aye.
Taylor.
Aye.
Overton.
Aye.
Strader.
Aye.
Whitlock.
All ayes, motion carries. The item is agreed to. Best of luck. Okay. With that, we'll move on to department commission reports. And at least the way I thought I heard the motion, we were going to go to the budget amendment first.
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, then with that, we'll invite Mr. Miles up for a fiscal year 2025 budget amendment in the amount of $80,020 for consulting services. And I'll turn this over to Mr. Miles.
Evening, Mayor and Council. Nice to see you. Thanks for the flexibility to move me up. I appreciate it. I think I'll start with, this is a federal mandate, which never feels good. I think if you do take the intent into consideration, I believe it's well intended. If you look at transparency in government, state and local levels, this is really about ensuring that we continue to be transparent, allowing our customers, all of them across the board, to access our services. It doesn't feel good to have a federal mandate, but in that regard, I think it's the right thing to do. So I am here for a budget amendment in the amount of $80,020 for consulting services, to have consultants look at our websites, web content, mobile device content, as it relates to ADA standards that the Department of Justice just implemented a new rule last April of 2024. For some background on that rule, we've spent the last kind of summer, fall, winter looking at the rule, talking with experts, talking with other agencies, working really with our team. And I do want to thank Emily and Allie in legal, Bree and Trevor and the communications team, the IT team, Dayami and Dave and Mike. They've been great at looking at this rule and kind of implementing things over time. If you read through the memo, we've implemented what's called a widget. It's a tool that basically works off of AI. It's looked at our website. It's the little blue dot with the person in it at the top right. That's basically AI working in the background, finding some of these errors and noticing and automatically making the improvements. It can't do everything though, and we know that. So that's, as we progress through this effort, we looked at that type of tool and what else do we need to do. Knowing that we don't have an in-house ADA expert, where there's sort of a suite of people that have some experience in some areas of it, That's where we landed on the fact that we do need consulting services to ensure that the city's in the right position come April of 2026, that we're in compliance with the rule. So that's what we're here tonight, is asking for that budget amendment to ensure that we can bring a consultant in. Just some of the things we want them to look at: again, mobile device apps, web content for review and recommendations on how to improve those, along with making some of those improvements. A lot of our files, PDF files, Word documents, the widget tool can examine. So we need somebody with the expertise to at least look at a suite of those to say, in general, the first 10% we look at, here's how many errors those find, so that we know the rest of those documents probably need to be looked at as well. We also want somebody to be able to give us a diagnostic tool that says, hey, here's a suite of your issues. Now you've got a list, go tackle those items. And then to provide some training opportunities for all of the staff that are involved in websites, whether that's, it gets into terms like alt text. So when you see a picture on a web page, somebody that can't see that picture sees the words, can read the words, can hear the words audibly behind the scenes. Color contrast, things of that nature. We learned that on our website. When you were 3 clicks into the website, yellow on white doesn't do really well for people that are seeing impaired. So those are the types of things we're asking of that consultant service. So maybe I'll stop there, let you guys ask any questions you have, and happy to address.
Thank you. Council questions?
Mr. Mayor, just a
Councilman Cavan.
comment. Dave, again, I appreciate these memos. It helps to really outline things. I think the only question that I had that probably council may have had is, why now versus going into budget season? And you kind of see it referenced in the memo, but in order for us to complete the work by the deadline, staff felt that it was more appropriate to bring the budget amendment piece. I know we would all prefer to go through the budget amendment. I think staff would prefer to do that as well, but in light of the timeliness issue, felt that this budget amendment was necessary. So I appreciate the education on this, Dave.
You're welcome.
Any further questions?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cavan.
That, I move that we approve the budget amendment in the amount of $80,020 for consulting services.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the budget amendment for $80,020. Is there discussion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh. Little Roberts. Taylor.
Aye.
Overton.
Aye.
Strader.
Aye.
Whitlock.
All ayes, motion carries. Sam is agreed to. Thank you.
Thanks.
With that, we'll move on to our next Department Commission report, which is the Employee Health Benefits Trust update continued. And turn this over to Mr. Neri.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Here we have an update again, just to hopefully answer some of the questions that have come up in the last couple of presentations, hopefully answer a few more questions and some explanation as we prepare to bring a budget amendment forward over the next week or two based on the timing for finance. I'd also like to thank the folks that are in the room. We have some of our board members that are here present, some of our HR support staff that provide support to the trust, as well as our partners with Gallagher, as well as Blue Cross, both in the room and online. Tina, do you have the? Great, thank you. I listed in the end, a little bit of recap for any of the folks online or have been watching some of these. We've tried to bring over the last couple of presentations just kind of where we are as a trust, kind of where the state of it is currently, both financially as well as some of the programming. And so I did list all the trustees on there for folks so they would know who were part of this group. They're all employees. Kevin West is our outside counsel that represents the trust. Again, the trust is a separate entity. It's a partner with the city on this program, but they do have to operate and function somewhat independently as well. Okay, so I want to follow up on some of the questions that have been asked and hopefully we can answer some of those for everyone. One of the questions that was brought up was about GLP drugs and whether or not those have been driving some costs for the program. And for those that don't know what that is, the common ones that you hear about publicly are things like Ozempic and Mounjaro and a few others. And the answer to that is generally no. They are not driving up they're not the largest part of the cost. They're not driving up the large claims. I looked on our list of the top 30 drugs that we are prescribed of members in our plan. Only 4 are GLP drugs, and approximately less than 10% of those drugs are related to the costs of the prescription claims. So from a cost standpoint, they're not significant in relation to some of the other things that are out there in the marketplace. But that was the question that was asked we thought we should answer. When was the last time the plan was marketed or pulse checked? We discussed pulse checks the last time and kind of the difference between a pulse check and an RFP. And one of the questions about that was, when did we do it last? So as you see here, basically 2017 for plan year 2018, when marketing was done by Mercer. Mercer was our marketing and HR consultant at the time. We are no longer with them. Gallagher is our consultants now. In 2020, in anticipation for us moving into the, as we were moving into the trust, we did do that then. We did that in conjunction with the benefits committee. We decided not to market with that transition at that particular point. We'd already done that in front of that. So we entered into a 3-year rate guarantee. So we've been in a rate guarantee with Blue Cross for 2 cycles now, 2021 through 23, and now 24 through 26. So this current term we're in expires at the end of December of 2026. We do have provisions in the contract that we could pull out of that if we needed to, but unless there was a compelling reason to, there is a financial penalty to doing that. So we have done that to try to maintain some consistency both in the services as well as the cost, because that does help keep our costs down and does give us a rate lock for the services that we're receiving from Blue Cross for administration on this. So that was hopefully answers that question. There was no increase last year and now a potential 17% increase this year. And I don't think it's been very clear, and I apologize because I think I'm the person that has not made it clear enough to folks. The 17% that we're talking about is the cost for the program, not the administration of the program, but the costs that is incurred by the members. And the members are our employees or their dependents, and those are for the medical services they receive. That's for hospital visits, doctor visits, prescriptions, surgeries, whatever they may be receiving. That's where the potential costs and expense has really grown significantly. So it's not the administration that's being done by our service provider, but by the actual costs of the services that are received out there. And the 17%, as we put it in the slide, is trying to keep the trust and trying to anticipate what those costs are going to be. And as I put in here, again, we had looked at a potential increase of 4% a year ago. That was suggested by our consultant, Gallagher, as well as our actuarial. But because we were trying to right-size the trust and keep within a budgetary that was reasonable, the determination was with the surplus that we had at the time, we thought we could absorb that type of increase. Well, as you can see, the increase has been significantly more than that. There has been a higher cost for those services than that 4%, and that's where the gap is. So now our estimates are running higher. So based on those needs, based on those trends that we're seeing, our actuarials and Gallagher are suggesting, we don't have final numbers, but suggesting that we need to be anticipating potentially higher costs of those medical needs going forward. So again, those are anticipating what the medical costs are going to be. That has nothing to do with the services for our administration through our provider with Blue Cross. So direction was also asked about using can the trust use the city's procurement process, whether it be for a pulse check or whether it be through a RFP. And our trust attorney has advised not to do that, that there should be some separation between how the trust functions and the city. He also felt that the city procurement, again, an RFP, which when you're looking for actually a program, like when we did the initial RFP for going out to a trust, is a more functional reason to do that. The rationale in the industry in using the other method, which is what they term a pulse check, is again, you're looking at the service provider, because when you get a service provider, you're paying a service fees for administration and for stop loss, but you're also getting all those accesses that go with that. So when you use that service provider, that also gives you those accesses to the networks. That's really how most of those are all driven, is predominantly on what network they have access to and what discounts that may be available through those networks, what services are provided through those networks. So here, our trust attorneys recommend we don't do that. We use Gallagher because that's the functions they perform. They're an industry expert. That would be the more likely or logical way to do it, in his opinion. I asked Mr. Watts, our procurement manager, the same question, and he also came to the same conclusion, that from a best practice standpoint, in his opinion, it made more sense to use a service like Gallagher. Again, they are the industry experts. They know the programs that we have. They know the needs that our particular work group has. They know the types of programs that are really more functional and usable for our employees. And so they would be more able to help us evaluate the services that are available in the marketplace to match up with our needs. So their recommendation would also be, or his recommendation also would be, to use them rather than through the procurement process. Again, the recommendation from the trust remain with Blue Cross currently for the duration of our contract. Gallagher would then market the services next year. So the anticipation of 2027, we would go and do a pulse check and to see what the services in the industry would be, what those would be to match up with the needs of our customer base, our employees, and make sure that we can maintain the level of services that they've been accustomed to, that meet the needs of their particular dependents and employees, so that we can continue to maintain a seamless service as we move forward into 27. The trust would then, after we do that process, would then come back again next year during the budget process to show the council what we've done, what conclusion we reached, what evaluation we've done, and what we recommend going forward for the next few years. And likely, well, hopefully, again, I don't know, the market changes slightly, but we would like to enter in similar contracts where they have some price guarantees and some at least some clarity and for budgeting purpose for the future on the administrative side, that we can maintain a fairly consistent rate of increase for those costs and keep them within kind of a reasonable market. You know, again, the other side, the medical piece, is the one that's the hardest to predict. And this was a table I'd sent out to all the council members, and really it's just a kind of a benchmark that is used that was provided by our consultant as to kind of how you look at these two different types of methods and how you would look at from here where you have a self-funded program, you already have that established, you have a program that's established, and now you're going to be looking at this type of services that you're providing to your employees and their dependents, and evaluating the services you're receiving for administering those, as well as the costs for those, and what access and availability of that network can be for those different services, and how that would then relate to the cost of the program. So again, their recommendation is that in the industry, the norm is to use that pulse check and evaluate the service providers that way, and not necessarily do an RFP like you would do in a fully funded plan. And that's the difference between them. With a self-funded plan like we have, that's more of the standard. If you're doing a fully funded, as we did in the past, before we moved to this, that's what you did. You marketed the entire plan because you aren't administering any of it. Here, most of the management of the programs, what we allow, what we don't allow, what's covered or what's not covered, is managed by the trust, not by the provider, and that's the difference. There's also a higher cost normally with that as well. These are some of the costs in the past, just to give you kind of a snapshot. The one I wanted to draw your attention to primarily are the costs that you're seeing on the net cost for the coverage as well as the net claims. I mean, you get the significance in claims, and you're seeing in 2024, the claims were $8 million, and with fees, $9.2 million. I mean, that's where the jump has been, is in those net claims. That's where the big numbers are coming from, and that's what they're looking at and trying to give us some estimate on the future costs, on what it could be, and what we're trying to anticipate in front of that. So just a little table on what we've talked about. 2018-19 fully insured, we had lesser employees than we do today. A larger amount paid in net costs and administrative fees. They were higher. That net cost includes fees for administration as well as stop loss. And then there's some premiums for that. Self-funded, again, less in net cost. So you see the costs have come down in 2020 and gone down. The costs have come down some for those because, again, some of the fees or some administration is done differently under that. So again, but there were more claims because of COVID, and we had a lot of claims and things that were being paid for that we were new, we had not anticipated. A lot of employers in that particular time period had costs, as well as Blue Cross did as well, for things that, again, were new and unknown and things that we just had not anticipated at all. Again, rebounding from COVID in 22, you see surplus in the trust in 23. That helped offset the proposed 4% increase. 2024, larger spike in claims, far greater than the 4%. 2025, large claims again are driving the costs, have impacted the surplus and reserves. That's where we're anticipating a budget amendment that we should be bringing forward here in the next couple of weeks to help make up that gap and to maintain what Department of Insurance is requiring that we keep as a reserve to maintain the trust and maintain that going forward. Carrier rates, again, proposed rates for medical and prescription claims are based on experience. They don't set the rates for those. The carriers do, however, set administrative fees, which are shown here as net costs, which again includes the stop loss. I could talk a little about that in a sec. Again, there was no increase to member cost share for their current plan through claims costs that have continued to increase. This is an issue that people need to keep in the forefront. And I think we've talked about this a couple of times. All of our employees do not pay any cost themselves for their coverage. That has not changed. That has been that way since I've been here. That's always been the same. So you think you have a plan that's costing more money and there's no contribution from the employees for that. So it's going to have a higher cost. That's not going to, that's a decision, a business decision the city has made and we've continued to make. Doesn't mean it can never change, but that's a business choice we've made. Also, we have a contribution towards dependents. And we changed that. It was 20% for a number of years. It moved up to 25% for employees back during the recession in about 9 or 10. It moved up to 25%. We moved it back to 20% in about 2017 or 18. And it's maintained that. Again, the plan has cost more. The costs have gone more. The contribution on the employee side has maintained the same. So again, there's going to be a higher cost to those things. Again, specifically, the claims costs have gone up 30% and trend up. And again, the claims account for about 90% of the total cost of the self-funded plan. So again, the cost of it has gone up significantly. In utilization year over year, you can see there was a $2 million increase in claims. Overall claims in 23 were 7.3 million. In 2024, 9.3 million. Top drivers of those were cancer, gastrointestinal disorder, musculoskeletal disorder. In 2023, there were 5 members with more than 100,000 in claims. In 24, 11. So we have employees or dependents that have increased in cost. Lots of reasons for that. Again, one of our biggest drivers that we do tend to focus on is early detection. We want people to go out and find these issues early. They are more treatable early. They're generally less expensive early, but they also are a longer time period of treating them as well. So you're going to have those things, but again, it's related to the plan and the cost for coverage. Stop loss, again, is part of the administrative cost. We have evaluated our stop loss at $225,000. We have had that evaluated 2 years ago? Yeah. 2 years ago, we had that evaluated to see if that was the right amount. Basically, for those online, that means the plan pays all of the costs for an individual up to that stop loss. And after that, we have our insurance above that. So it's covered beyond that. That number is one that we have evaluated a number of times. Do we make it lower? Do we make it higher? Lower it, obviously, there's a potential, but you will pay higher fees. And we've tried to evaluate and find that sweet spot and work with our consultants with Gallagher to figure out where are the majority of the claims land And I am not an actuarial and I am not an expert. We certainly have experts in the room if you want more specifics on that. But ultimately, the decision was made is that seemed like the sweet spot for our program, that the number of claims below $225,000 was of a right size, for lack of a better way of saying it, to make it practical and fundable to keep it at that number. To raise it higher, you could certainly have lesser costs for reinsurance above that number, but that means you're going to pay again for every injury or every claim up to whatever the higher number is. So we try to find that spot, and that's probably one of the key components as we continue to evaluate how the trust functions or whether that number should move. So I'm not going to say it's going to be 225,000 forever, but it could certainly go down or up depending on the marketplace and depending on the usage.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Shannon.
I'm curious about how our contract works. Is it itemized in a way that makes it easy to understand how much the reinsurance component is specifically? And that's okay if that's a follow-up.
Sure. I mean, yes, I believe so, but I could not quote that to you off the top of my head.
I mean, no different than like, I'm totally peeved that my homeowner's insurance is going up. And so have commenced discussions with my homeowner insurance provider. Why is this justified? Should we look at increasing our deductible? I feel like this is a similar exercise. You know, I would just be curious to have more information about the contract. And I think if, try to put this in a diplomatic way, I think if the information about the contract itself was explained in our last meeting, I think we would have had a little bit of a better discussion, just because I didn't realize, I think others did not realize, that we actually had a fixed contract that would have a cost associated with it if we were to change directions, right? I don't actually think that a market pulse check is a real thing. I think it's something that we're doing. It's probably a great practice that we should do. Like, I fully support us market pulse checking regularly. Like, I think that's awesome. But I really view this as more of a this is a pretty straightforward conversation. It's like, should we be going out to an RFP right now? Clearly the answer is no. If our contract, you know, kind of keeps us from doing so, it doesn't make economic sense. There are disruptions to our employees, which you covered in the last meeting. So I think it's good that we're kind of clearing this up just so we have a lot of clarity, just understanding what contract we have. I personally would like to actually see the contract and just have more information about, you know, the different components, I guess, of the service we're being provided. And I think the reinsurance question is a legitimate question to ask the next time we, you know, look at this, which sounds like would be closer to heading to 2027. Okay. So I guess that's my feedback so far.
Well, Bill, you did point over your shoulder at Eli when you mentioned the word expert, so he can come up at any point in time and.
I was thinking more of Scott, but Eli's always welcome to come up if he wants, but we can certainly keep going unless you have a specific question you want to ask our consultants or Christina.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Taylor.
Quick question. I was wondering, since we're kind of on the topic of
Okay.
225,000, I'm assuming we don't have lifetime limits on claims. We just have a yearly max, correct?
Yes.
Have you looked at what that would, you know, if we were to have a lifetime max and then some reinsurance, anything above and beyond that? Is that something that you guys have looked at?
If I recall, I don't believe you can have a lifetime max anymore, but I don't recall. Yeah. I believe that's not allowed anymore. There used to be, like, for example, in the past, you'd have plans that had like $1 million max. That's no longer allowed, so there isn't that. Again, so go back on our earlier discussion. So the 17% renewal was the highest projected. That's kind of the range we were given as a potential to look at from a market or from a budgeting standpoint. So that's why we want to at least forecast out to the highest that potentially could be. We're still awaiting on some final renewals recommendations, so we haven't got that finalized as yet. Again, to summarize, the administrative fees and stop loss don't drive the increase in costs. It's the $2 million increase in claims. That's really where the numbers have really increased significantly. The renewal increase is 3%. That's how much our administrative fees are. They're approximately 10% of the total cost of the plan is how much we're paying in fees. That's just, again, the stop loss and the administration fees for the third, it's called third-party administration. I broke out a couple of bullets on kind of explaining those more granularly, just on how much they are per person, how they're calculated and what we're paying for and how much that is. Again, if we want to go into more detail, you can, or if you want to ask folks that are smarter than me on this subject, they're here and hopefully can answer that for you. That's really all of it. So that's what we're looking at. I mean, again, the cost, and I know the concerns that have been raised about the cost are really driven by the market that's out there. And again, we do get discounts. We do have programs. I had a person in the last week said, you know, they had, again, we've pushed these programs off into folks, but as I was stating to you last time, people tend to not think of these things until they need it. And sometimes because they don't think of it in the moment, when they get scheduled for something or they have a recommendation or referral to do something. And all we try to do from the trust standpoint is remind folks there's other options you may want to look at. And I'll tell you from a member, as a board member, and as our board has said many times, I never want people to not go to the doctor, go get treatment, take care of themselves. That's absolutely important. But if there's options and opportunities for them, and again, recently a person spoke to me about it and said, I forgot about the Smart Shopper program. I forgot that existed. And they had to go in for a procedure. And they said, because we had talked about it again, it was in the forefront of her mind. She knew she had to go in for this procedure. She got it booked. She called Smart Shopper. What can I do? They said, we can get this booked from this one provider in one location to another one across the street. They go in and pay for it, you know, run your card, whatever. And in 2 weeks, we will send you a rebate check. You'll get money back for going to that. It'll be essentially discounted to you for doing it. And she's like, that sounds like a win. Took 5 minutes. 5 minutes on the phone. It was done. It was easy. But we happened to talk about it a lot. And so she knew about it and she used it. I asked our provider, I asked Gallagher and Blue Cross recently, can we do more? What are we missing as a trust? What can we do better? And frankly, they said, I don't know what more you can do than what you're already doing. And we discuss it a lot. How do we remind folks what's there? The opportunities that exist, the ways to make this program cheaper, the way they could use it sooner. Because one of the things that I think happens a lot when we have a flexible spending account like we have for employees today, if you go to the doctor in January and they tell you you're going to need whatever, and it costs $100, you'll think, here's my card, run the $100 and I'm good. But then in November, if you needed that, if you used up your flex spending, you might remember, hey, we got the Smart Shopper thing. Maybe I'll go look at that and save me some money. Well, you could have done the same thing in January, but sometimes you don't think about it because you just think I'll just run the card and I'll worry about it. Well, if you think about it and you try to make people smarter consumers, they may use it sooner. They may use it more often. It may become second nature. And again, we're hopeful as we try to keep reiterating this with our employees, they also tell their coworkers, who then also tell their spouses. Because that's really where the access we're trying to keep pushing towards is getting your dependents to use that too, to use that opportunity. It will save money, save them money and save the plan money. But we keep pushing it, we keep trying to do it. And for the size of a program, with the types of issues that we have, employees have, it just costs money. It just does. So I wish I had a greater answer. And I'll say the same thing I said to folks. If there was a magic bullet, we'd all use it. You know, there was a fix that was easy, we would just do it. And unfortunately there isn't. But hopefully that puts to rest some of your concerns or some of the questions you have. We certainly can provide you the contracts. That's not an issue. Again, we will reevaluate as we do next year as we go forward. And, you know, again, our objective always is from the trust standpoint is to provide a good program at a practical cost for the employees, as well as for the citizens of our community to provide this service and make sure that we remain competitive. I mean, this is, and I think the mayor has said this to our employee groups, when people come to work here, that is one of the #1 things they ask about. kind of benefits do we have? What's it going to cost me? How do I cover my family? And for recruiting people and retaining people, it is critical. And that's, again, a factor we evaluate too, to make sure we can meet those needs for the city and the employees.
Bill, maybe a question that you can confirm, deny, or otherwise.
Okay.
Part of our administrative costs that we pay basically getting access to the negotiated contracts of that company or the services we receive.
Yes.
And I think that's kind of one of the value benefits that are out there that will be, how do you articulate the value of those negotiated contracts? I think it's going to be the biggest question if you were looking for value and what claims we're paying. And I think that's the potential savings in the future or not savings. We could have the best savings based upon our current usage, or there could be someone better. But there's also obviously the case of, that's just if we understand in the same arena. There's also if we want to look at controlling costs other ways, as we kind of talked about, plan design changes, et cetera. And I think those are questions for council moving forward, is if you have a dollar expectation that say how much should the trust live within, they're going to do the work based upon that information that is provided. If we need to get into that conversation moving forward, but that wasn't for today. I just at least want to just get clarification on that very first part. That's part of what we're buying with the administrative, is all the work they do to negotiate on behalf of their clients for the fees that are paid.
Yes.
Okay. Councilman Cavanagh.
Bill, thank you. I think this is either a third or fourth presentation, the most robust that addressed questions that I had and questions that I didn't know I had until you presented the information. So thank you for that. I did want to give you a chance, though, to at least respond to, there were some additional questions that I had sent via email in response to the email that you had sent Councilmember Strader and I think specifically talking about why it took a significant amount of time for council to be informed that we had a price lock to begin with. I think that could have addressed a lot more of the questions that we had early on if someone would have informed us of that. It's been a head scratcher for me as to why no one will tell me why nobody informed us of this, and I'm hoping you can give me some context.
Sure, I can give you some context from my perspective. I don't know if it'll answer your question. From my perspective, our intent to come here was to prepare the council to understand where the program is, because we're going to ask for a budget amendment. That was the only intent from the outset. We weren't here to talk about remarketing. We weren't talking about RFPs. We weren't talking about any of that in my mind. We were talking about, where are we? There was an increased cost to the program, and that increased cost was going to lead to a need for a budget amendment because we had a deficit in our reserve. And that was the only focus of my intent the first time we came. That's what we're here to talk about. When that was brought up on what if we did this, when we went back and looked, I think Christina actually came up and said, I'll have to go look at that. It wasn't in the forefront of her mind. So it wasn't an intent to do anything other than that really wasn't what we were thinking about, we're talking about. And when we went back to evaluate, well, could we do that? Because that's now being asked. Well, the question was, well, yes, but there's a cost and there's a price. And so it just wasn't on our forefront, Councilman. That's all it was. That we were here really to just prepare to explain kind of where we are, to explain why we then need a budget amendment. So that was the only reason.
I appreciate your response. Bill, Mr. Mayor, a couple more.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Bill, you said we've got somebody from Gallagher that's here. I do have a couple of questions for them.
Sure.
They're online or here in person.
Oh, Scott's here in the audience.
All right. It's Scott.
Yeah, Scott Howell.
Scott, thank you for being here. I appreciate it. And I think to Councilmember Schrader, your subject matter expertise is very, very helpful. So my questions are about really, I guess, government-based self-funded plans or self-funded trust, excuse me. And like Councilmember Schrader, the term pulse check was something I'd never heard of before. I have to be honest, when I talked to our purchasing agent, Keith Watts, a couple of days after that, and he's like the best purchaser in the state. He had never heard of that term as well. So it has been also a head scratcher for me. And when I hear the feedback from our legal attorney, and then I think from feedback of the trust legal attorney, I'm going to make an assumption then that 0 of the government-funded trusts that you represent either follow government-based procurement procedures or go out for RFP. Can you answer that? Is my assumption correct or incorrect?
Sorry, that they either follow.
Zero government-funded trusts
Uh,
follow their city procurement process and refrain from going out for RFP. They go out for the market pulse check. And if that is not, if my assumption is incorrect, then I would like to know what percentage follow municipal or government-based procurement processes, because we just heard from the attorney representing the trust that we should not do that, and I need to understand why. And again, we are told that this market pulse check, which something is very foreign to me, is the best practice. I would assume that 100% of them would be using the market pulse check.
Yeah, so 100% of our government self-insured trusts do their own procurement out. They do not use the municipality's procurement department to do their procurement. The market check or pulse check, really it's just, and I think I saw this in one of your notes, it's really just a less formal RFP, less questions, less of a scoring rubric, relies more on our working relationship with the limited number of partners that exist in our market. And it's more financially driven, right? What are your discounts? What are your administration fees? What are your stop loss? We know their capabilities because we work with all the vendors in this market with several clients. And so a lot of the procurements that I have seen that are done by a procurement department have a lot of questions to gauge the capabilities of the
certainly
vendors that you're working with. And because we know that, it requires a little bit less formality in the purchasing. And so that pulse check isn't, as you've mentioned, it's not like a broadly used term in the market. I think it came up in a meeting as just kind of a less formal RFP market check.
And so, Mr. Mayor,
Ms. McCaver.
is it 80% of those that you represent use the pulse check? 50%?
I think it frankly depends on their situation, right? If they're really comfortable with the partners that they have and they're just wanting to make sure that it's financially competitive, it's really that less formal market check process. If there are major cost or service issues, then that generally leads to a more formal RFP process in anticipation of probably a bigger move. And percentage-wise, again, because it's just conditional on the situation, I don't have a percentage for you.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Schrader.
Yeah. So, this is interesting because I've been trying to wrap my head around this. I understand that the trust is a separate legal entity from the City of Meridian. Tracking you there. But I'm still really perplexed that we are unable legally to use our own city procurement department to run an RFP process in the future. Like, I find that very perplexing because it just feels like kind of just like a waste. I mean, I see Keith back here. He's the best of the best. I want him to look at every single RFP we ever do. I really trust his team. I trust his approach to things. So I guess maybe not to needle you guys anymore about this. I just have more of just an ask, which is before we get to 2027, when it's the appropriate time for us to do an RFP, I'd like us to just really take a hard look is there a way we can leverage our procurement division to assist with this? Are there some guardrails, you know, like a wall we could put up between certain individuals and procurement? Is there a way to do this so that we can leverage the expertise within our procurement department to at least be looking at everything? Just because I just feel like it's just a huge waste to me. I think Gallagher is probably doing an okay job, but, you know, I haven't like assessed your performance or something on this, but I just feel like we have this amazing internal resource. I just find it kind of shocking that we can't find a way to use that resource to kind of check what we're doing. So I don't know. That's just something I wanted to throw out there. I'd like us to explore that more. You know, we have plenty of time. I mean, we've got like a year. I'd like us to explore that more and really understand that. And is there a way to, you know, make sure that, you know, even if they're not directly doing it, that they can weigh in on it at a minimum or review, or maybe there is a way that they could do an RFP if there are some guardrails put in place, you know. That's just me talking out loud, but that's probably the most surprising thing that I've heard. That doesn't make a ton of sense to me. So I'm just sharing, but yeah.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Taylor.
I just have a couple of questions. One question I was wondering about a little bit, and it's kind of dovetailing off of some of the questions just previously. As a separate entity, is Gallagher essentially the staffing support for the trustees as they look at that? Or do we use city staff or HR in other capacities to support the trustees? I understand it's kind of separating a little bit from the RFP process, but also it's the same. I'm kind of curious, do we use city staff for your staffing needs as beneficiaries or as the trustees of it? Or is Gallagher essentially kind of the contracted staff? I'm kind of wanting to understand that relationship just a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's.
Yeah, Gallagher is contracted for subject matter expertise and some work to support the trust. And then the HR department also provides a lot of support to the trust as advisors, I guess. Oh, sorry.
So maybe I can help answer that a little bit. So primarily the support for HR is because, again, that's the employee contact, right? So the employees, for all the services that are needed, use HR as their contact point for any of those things. So HR does work with Blue Cross, Delta, Willamette, VSP for all of the services that are provided, right? Those are city benefits. So the trust is there to help manage the program, help create the program, help keep the cost of the program in some level of control, and oversee that piece of it. But the administration of it is done by HR and the HR staff. So Christina, for example, although she's a senior HR generalist, is on the board as a board member, not as an HR's representative, but as a board member. Reba, though, does work for HR, and her job and benefits is to help, again, make sure the benefits are being administered correctly through our vendors. And maybe I can go back and answer Councilmember Schrader's question. When I talked to Kevin West, he did not say we cannot use the city process. His recommendation was we should avoid that if there's no need to, if it can be done other ways, because again, Department of Insurance likes to make sure there's some separateness to the entity of the trust from the city. And the challenge that you have on an RFP is because it's a much more static and a little more static process, it's kind of sometimes answering the questions like the mayor asked, like, how do we evaluate the services that can be provided by this vendor versus that vendor, and try to put that into some level of questionnaire and do that. We spoke to one of our deputies who recently joined us, actually was involved in the state process of that, and said it was incredibly complicated to do that through an RFP because, again, they had no slate to start with. They had no program to start with. So it really was, tell us what you can do for us. Here we have a program. We already have something that works for the employees, that Gallagher is intimately aware of how it functions. And so that's why Mr. West's recommendation was you should use that. That's your best actual resource, is the people that understand how this works. And again, not that Mr. Watts and his group don't understand the procurement process, but they don't work intimately with this program, so it's a little different. That's all. I mean, so I just want to make sure, he didn't say it's like illegal to do it, or it's not legally okay. It's not recommended. I mean, this, again, the state has been pretty clear that they expect to see some separation between the trust function. Originally, when we were setting up the trust, the question was asked, can a council member be on the trust board? And the State Department of Insurance said, no, they can't, because that's a funding entity. It's separate and apart from the trust. And they felt that was not okay. And their reading of their own rules said no. So they want to maintain some level of separation. So again, we will evaluate that, Councilmember Sugar. I don't have an issue with it. Again, I'm not an expert. Scott is. Other folks are. We're going off the advice that we're getting recommended as to how we should function to make sure we stay in good graces with the Department of Insurance. We do maintain the best, the best program for our employees, and make sure that, again, there's some connectivity between HR and what the employees are needing.
Yeah, that's very helpful. I appreciate that. And Mayor, just one more
Councilman
follow-up
Taylor.
question, just a kind of a simple question. We've entered into 2 3-year rate guarantee contracts. Is that a rate guarantee for the administration fees for a set period of time? Is that, just want to cut and clear. Okay, thank you.
And I think just for clarification, generally, like as was said, the trust can do an RFP. You could write an RFP and you could have Keith review it in that context. I mean, it's just what entity is putting out an RFP for review is, I'm going to say 95% of the question. Whether or not you want to do it is one, who puts it out and does the evaluation compared to doing through the city's processes. So, okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Willock.
Scott, thanks for being here. And full disclosure, the company I work with works with Gallagher, and they help broker the health benefits for our employees. So I'm familiar with the work that you do, and I see the comparison. And this whole pulse check is a term of art that probably none of us were really familiar with. But you know what you provide for our company. In my mind, that sounds a lot like a pulse check, because you take our current plan and then you compare it to virtually everything else that's offered out in the state. And we can look at gold and silver and platinum and titanium and zirconium that's offered by everybody else, and we can see their deductibles, their out-of-pocket, their prescription, their 30-day, their 90-day mail, all of that. And we can do then the comparison as a company, and I would assume the same as the trust, and we can say, we want to stay with what we have, or we want to pay more and get this, or we want to pay less and get fewer benefits. Is that the pulse check that we're talking about, where you're able to just take an environmental scan of what's out there, compare it with what we have, versus, in my mind, an RFP is kind of going out, clean slate, tell us what you can do for us, like Mr. Neri said. Is there a difference in the term of art between the RFP and the pulse check?
No, I think you've got the kind of the difference. And again, that pulse check term, I think, came up in a meeting, like it's not a market standard term or anything. I think it just came up in a market check or pulse check, like just that whole idea is, yeah, we know what we have. We know who our options are. We go to the vendors who we know can provide what we need. Say, here's what we have. What can you do for us? Versus an RFP where you need to get more information about maybe vendors that are unknown, or to your point, plans that aren't set, and you're asking for more input there.
And maybe can we just get rid of the word pulse check? I mean, like I said, I just did a benefits market check Google search, and AI came back and basically described 100% of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So if we can just call it benefits market check moving forward, it at least is a term of art that AI understands in that context.
And frankly, in our office, as we do work for clients, it all kind of falls under the umbrella of an RFP still. Like, it's just, the level of questions that you're asking, the RFP, the kind of the level of formality. So it's a lot of the same thing.
Any additional questions? Comments?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Taylor.
Make a comment, not a question. As someone who's been self-employed for over 5 years, who purchased my own plans and benefits on my own, and then coming to the city of Meridian, we really do have a tremendous benefit that we offer our employees. And so I compliment the councils and the mayor and the trustees, all the work that's been done across the board. It's a really tremendous benefit. And I think, to your point, as employees understand the value that we provide, I think it's very, very helpful, because we do provide a really, really great set of benefits all around. And I think I want to compliment everyone who's involved in that process all along the way, everything from Bill and the trustees to HR and decisions made at the city leadership level over the past few years.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I will at least add to that one point is, unfortunately, the most difficult thing is that people realize the value when they're leaving. And they say, now you have to pay for the whole plan yourself, and it's no longer covered the same. And they realize, how much is that? How much am I getting? How much is mine? How much is my family? So trying to get that in front of them before that is what we strive to do.
Thank you very much. Appreciate everyone being here this evening for the conversation. So
Thank you.
with that, we'll move on to item 6, which is ordinance number 25-2085. Ask the clerk to read this ordinance by title.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ordinance number 25-2085, an ordinance Summerlin West subdivision H-2024-0023 annexing all of Lot 2 and 3, Block 1, Laredo Estates subdivision as filed in Book 58 of Plats at page 5,500 and 5,501, records of Ada County, Idaho, an unplatted portion of the southwest quarter of Section 5, Township 2 North, Range 1 East, Boise, Meridian, Ada County, Idaho, more particularly described in Exhibit A, rezoning 63.965 acres of such real property from RUT to R8, 17.274 acres, medium-density residential, and R15, 46.691 acres, medium-high-density residential zoning districts, directing city staff to alter all applicable use and area maps as well as the official zoning maps and all official maps depicting the boundaries and the zoning districts of the city of Meridian in accordance with this ordinance, providing that copies of this ordinance shall be filed with the Ada County Assessor, the Ada County Treasurer, and the Ada County Recorder, and the Idaho State Tax Commission as required by law, repealing conflicting ordinances and providing an effective date.
Thank you. Council, you've heard this ordinance read by title. Is there anybody that would like it read in its entirety? If not, do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Taylor.
move that we approve ordinance number 25-2085.
Have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 25-2085. Is there any discussion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Cavanagh.
Aye.
Little Roberts.
Aye.
Taylor.
Aye.
Overton.
Aye.
Strader.
Aye.
Whitlock.
All ayes, motion carries. Item is agreed to. Council, anything under future meeting topics or a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Cavanagh.
Chairman, you got a big speech this week. Just want to let you know how much we support you and looking forward to hearing you provide our community with an update at your annual State of the City. Apologies I won't be there in person. Watch it online.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I hear can stream from any airline anywhere.
I made sure to buy the premium Wi-Fi. I want to be able to hear it in its entirety. Mr. Mayor, with that, I move we adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Motion and second to adjourn the meeting. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it.